If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 46, Mun vs ATM, 1 second leg. The rain in Manchester did not fall, it materialized as a freezing, diagonal mist that coated the pitch of Old Trafford in a slick, shimmering sheen. It was quintessential English European night weather. Under the blinding glare of the stadium floodlights, the grass looked electric green, fast, and completely unforgiving. Inside the tunnel, the air was thick with the sharp, medicinal smell of camphor, deep heat, and raw adrenaline. 75,000 people were screaming outside, creating a low, vibrating hum that rattled the corrugated plastic of the tunnel walls. The UEFA Champions League anthem had just finished, and the two teams were lined up, waiting for the final signal from the Romanian referee, Istvan Kovacs, to march out into the cauldron. On the left side, Diego Simeone paced like a caged panther. Dressed entirely in a sharply tailored black suit over a black shirt, his hair slicked back, the Argentine manager looked less like a football coach and more like an underworld enforcer preparing for a hit. He was muttering rapidly in Spanish to his assistant, Nelson Vivas, his eyes darting toward the Manchester United players as he analyzed their body language. Simeone's mind was a tempest of tactical calculations. Over the past 3 weeks, he had analyzed how Marcus Vale's transition trap had surgically dismantled his side's aggressive, high-pressing start at the Wanda Metropolitano. By pushing Lodi and Vrsaljko high to chase an early goal, he had left the wide channels completely open, a void Paulo Dybala and Cristiano Ronaldo had exploited to score 2 devastating goals on the counter. He would not make the same mistake twice. He knew exactly what Vale wanted. He wanted Atletico to attack, to leave spaces, to become emotional. Tonight, Simeone had a counter plan. He was going to starve United of the counter-attack, compress the midfield, and target the weak links in United's build-up under the wet conditions. On the right side of the tunnel stood Marcus Vale. He was leaning casually against the brickwork, completely still. He wore his heavy, black club overcoat, collar turned up against the chill, his hands buried deep in his pockets. In his right pocket, his fingers moved with a rhythmic, hypnotic precision. Click, clack, click. The red tactical magnet rolled over his knuckles. 1. He looked incredibly bored. Simeone stopped pacing for a fraction of a second, his dark eyes locking onto the young Portuguese manager. He was searching for a crack. A sign of nerves. A twitch. Anything. A 27-year-old kid entering the biggest match of his life with a 2-0 aggregate lead, there had to be fear. Marcus didn't even look at him. He was staring blankly at a loose thread on the sleeve of the UEFA delegate's jacket standing 3 feet away. Let's go, Kovacs commanded, picking up the match ball. The roar that greeted the teams as they emerged from the tunnel was deafening. Old Trafford was a sea of red, white, and black scarves twirling in the freezing rain. The Stretford end unfurled a massive banner reading "The Religion," the sheer volume of the crowd vibrating in the players' chests. Marcus walked to his technical area and took a seat on the heated bench. Behind him, Michael Carrick leaned forward, a clipboard in hand. They've changed their shape slightly, boss. Looks like a 5-4-1 off the ball. Lodi and Vrsaljko are tucked right in. Simeone isn't going to push them up as he did in Madrid. He's terrified of Dybala getting in behind them again. Expected, Marcus murmured, his eyes scanning the pitch. Simeone realized his aggression killed him in the first leg. Tonight, he wants to suffocate the base of our diamond. He will drop deep, deny us the counter-attack, and try to force Telles and Trippier into making mistakes in possession. Marcus's lineup had been confirmed an hour prior. De Gea in goal. A back four of Trippier, Varane, Maguire, and Telles. The midfield was the suffocating 4-4-2 diamond, Dennis Zakaria anchoring at CDM, Bruno Fernandes and Donny van de Beek operating as the 2 central shuttlers, and Jadon Sancho deployed at the tip of the diamond as a pure number 10. Up front, Paulo Dybala partnered Cristiano Ronaldo. Simeone had likely hoped Marcus would bench Dybala for Rashford's pace to defend the lead. But Marcus knew that against a low block, pace was useless. He needed Dybala's close control to pick the locks. The referee's whistle pierced the Manchester night. Atletico Madrid kicked off, and the chess match began instantly. Simeone's adjusted game plan was terrifyingly apparent within the first 5 minutes. Having realized that pressing high left them vulnerable to counter-attacks, Atletico had come to Manchester to break United's rhythm through extreme, disciplined defending. They did not press high. Instead, they formed a rigid, impenetrable block 35 yards from their own goal. Savic, Gimenez and Reinildo refused to step out of the back line. Ronaldo, who had been heavily punished in the first leg, practically stood on Gimenez's toes. Simeone stood on the edge of his technical area, orchestrating the defensive shifting with violent, rapid hand gestures. He wanted United to have the ball. He wanted them to pass it around harmlessly in the rain, lulling them into a false sense of security before springing a physical trap. Every time Jadon Sancho or Paulo Dybala tried to receive the ball in the pockets of space between the lines, they were instantly surrounded by 3 neon yellow shirts. Koke and Rodrigo de Paul were playing like men possessed, tracking Bruno and Donny with relentless, bruising physicality. In the 9th minute, Dybala dropped deep to link play, exactly as he had done in Madrid. But this time, de Paul didn't track him, Kondogbia did. The massive defensive midfielder smashed into Dybala's back, legally barging him off the wet grass. The referee waved play on. Simeone clapped furiously. The dark arts were in full effect. Down on the pitch, Marcus did absolutely nothing. He had drilled this scenario into them for 3 straight days in the Carrington video room. They will refuse to press the center. They will try to force the ball wide to the fullbacks. Do not force the pass. Execute the passing patterns. Slowly, United began to adapt. Because Atletico's midfield was so narrow, Kieran Trippier and Alex Telles found themselves with acres of space on the touchlines. In the 14th minute, United stitched together a beautiful sequence. Zakaria, operating as an immovable pivot, shielded the ball from João Felix and passed to Bruno. Bruno pinged a cross-field diagonal to Telles. Telles drove forward, whipping a dangerous cross toward the penalty spot. 4. Ronaldo leaped, soaring above Reinildo, but his header flashed just inches wide of Jan Oblak's post. Old Trafford roared in appreciation. Simeone spun around, screaming at Marcos Llorente. Get closer to Telles. Don't let him cross. Despite their tactical superiority and Marcus's flawless game plan, football is ultimately played by human beings. And human beings succumb to pressure, fatigue, and the slick, unpredictable nature of a wet pitch. Simeone knew this. He had specifically instructed Marcos Llorente and Rodrigo de Paul to set pressing traps for Alex Telles. Simeone had identified the Brazilian left-back as the weakest technical link in United's build-up under extreme physical duress. In the 23rd minute, the relentless, suffocating pressure from the Spanish champions finally forced a crack in the armour. David De Gea played a short pass out to Harry Maguire on the left side of the penalty box. Maguire, seeing De Paul sprinting toward him to cut off the pass to Zakaria, quickly shifted the ball out wide to Alex Telles near the touchline. It was a safe, textbook pass, but it was predictable. And Marcos Llorente, Atletico's freakishly athletic right-sided midfielder, had anticipated it perfectly. Before the ball even reached Telles, Llorente was already accelerating. Telles took his eye off the ball for a fraction of a second to check downfield, looking for Sancho's run. It was a split-second lapse, a loss of focus spanning no more than half a second. The wet ball skidded off the slick grass and bounced awkwardly off his instep. A heavy touch. Llorente smashed into Telles, legally barging the Brazilian off the ball with sheer physical momentum before he could recover. Old Trafford gasped collectively. The defensive lines were instantly broken. Llorente drove violently toward the penalty box. Maguire stepped out to confront him, but Llorente simply poked the ball inside to Koke, who had positioned himself perfectly at the edge of the D. Koke didn't shoot. He faked the shot, sending Varane sliding past him on the wet turf, and slipped a delicate, disguised reverse pass through the legs of the recovering Zakaria. The pass found João Felix inside the penalty area. The young Portuguese forward's movement was spectral. He had drifted into the blind spot behind Tells's vacated position. Taking one touch to set himself, Felix opened his body and curled a stunning, unstoppable strike into the top right corner, perfectly wrapping his foot around the ball to take it out of De Gea's desperate reach. Manchester United 0-1 Atletico Madrid, aggregate, 2-1. The away end, tucked high into the corner of Old Trafford, erupted into pandemonium. The 3,000 travelling Spanish fans surged forward, throwing beers and flares, screaming in ecstasy. On the touchline, Diego Simeone lost his mind. He sprinted down the sideline, pumping his fists violently, screaming into the freezing rain, his black suit soaked. He had done it. He had set the trap, targeted the weak link, and dragged Atletico back into the tie. His players piled onto Felix near the corner flag in a chaotic mass of neon yellow. Old Trafford fell deathly silent. It was a chilling, familiar silence. It was the trauma of the Ole Gunnar Solskjær era rearing its ugly head. The crowd remembered nights like this, nights against PSG, against Leipzig, against Sevilla. The script was burned into their minds. United would concede a sloppy goal, the players would drop their heads, the captain would shout pointlessly, and the team would slowly, agonizingly crumble into a panic-stricken mess. Up in the commentary gantry, Darren Fletcher gripped his microphone. A massive error at the back from Alex Telles, and Atletico are right back in this tie. The momentum shifts in a heartbeat. Simeone's trap worked perfectly. Now we see what Marcus Vale's United is really made of. Do they panic? Down on the pitch, Harry Maguire gritted his teeth, looking furiously at Telles. Bruno Fernandes threw his arms down in frustration. On the bench, Michael Carrick stood up quickly, anxiety flashing across his face. He looked down at Marcus. Marcus was not looking at the celebrating Atletico players. He was not looking at Telles. He had stopped clicking the magnet, slipping it silently into his pocket. He calmly walked to the edge of the technical area. Bruno Fernandes looked over at his manager, his eyes wide, anticipating a tactical shift, a shout, a furious reprimand. Marcus stood in the rain. He caught Bruno's eye. Marcus simply raised his right hand and tapped his index finger against his temple twice. Think. Don't feel. He then pointed casually toward the center circle, instructing them to reset. No shouting. No wild gestures. Just cold, icy calmness. Bruno stared at him for a second. The tension bleeding out of the Portuguese playmaker was almost visible. He regained his composure, nodding sharply, and turned back to his teammates. Reset. Bruno clapped his hands, his voice carrying over the nervous murmur of the crowd. Shape. We hold our shape. Harry, Dennis, distances. Fix the distances. Maguire, who had been about to berate Telles, saw Marcus's complete lack of reaction on the touchline. The captain swallowed his anger, gave Telles a quick, firm pat on the back, and jogged back to his position. Simeone, jogging back to his technical area, glanced over at the United bench, expecting to see a manager frantically reshuffling his whiteboard. Instead, he saw Marcus Vale lazily sitting back down on the bench. Simeone's scowl deepened. The psychological warfare had failed to breach the hull. If Atletico Madrid thought the goal would rattle Manchester United, they were entirely mistaken. It had the exact opposite effect. It acted as a system reset, purging the nervous energy from the home side. For the next 15 minutes, Manchester United put on a clinic in systematic, emotionless football. They did not rush forward to seek an equalizer. They did not play panicked, long balls over the top into the waiting heads of Savic and Gimenez. They returned strictly to the disciplined shape of the 4-4-2 diamond. Zakaria became an immovable object at the base. Every time Laurent or Felix tried to press him to force another mistake, the Swiss giant legally bulldozed them off the ball and recycled possession with effortless one-touch passes. Donny van de Beek, operating in the tightest of spaces, demonstrated exactly why Marcus trusted him. He became a ghost, constantly finding the passing lanes between Koke and DePaul, pulling the Atletico midfield out of position. But the true genius of Marcus's adaptation lay in Paulo Dybala. Simeone had set his defense to sit deep and deny space. So, Marcus instructed Dybala to stop playing as a striker entirely. Dybala began dropping incredibly deep, almost playing as a third central midfielder alongside Bruno and Donny. This created an impossible tactical dilemma for Atletico. Dybala's movement gave United a 5v3 overload in the center of the pitch. If Jose Gimenez stayed back in his defensive line, Dybala had 10 yards of space to turn and dictate the play. But if Gimenez stepped out of the defensive line to track Dybala, he left Cristiano Ronaldo entirely alone in the center. In the 36th minute, United stitched together a staggering 36-pass sequence. They moved the ball from left to right, probing, prodding, stretching the Atletico defense. Simeone's men were running on fumes, chasing shadows as Dybala and Sancho manipulated the half spaces. "They're chasing ghosts out there," Jamie Carragher noted on the broadcast, a hint of awe in his voice. "United aren't even trying to score right now, they're just tiring Atletico's legs. It's completely deliberate. Vale knows Simeone's team cannot sustain this level of concentration." Sancho dropped a shoulder, sending Marcos Llorente slipping on the wet grass, before pinging a pass to Dybala. Dybala spun, committing Gimenez, before sliding a delicate ball out to Kieran Trippier. Trippier whipped a terrifying, low cross into the 6-yard box, missing a sliding Ronaldo's boot by mere millimeters. Simeone was screaming himself hoarse on the touchline, demanding his team push up and close the gaps, but they couldn't. The diamond had them pinned. The pressure was mounting, a slow, relentless tightening of a vice. In the 43rd minute, the relentless probing finally forced a physical break. Dybala received the ball on the half-turn just outside the box, beautifully nutmegging Coke. Gimenez, exhausted from the constant mental strain of deciding whether to step up or drop back, panicked. He rushed out of the defensive line and cynically dragged Dybala down by the shoulder. The referee blew for a foul. Yellow card for Gimenez. The foul was wide on the right, about 5 yards from the corner flag. Essentially, a short corner. As Kieran Trippier jogged over to collect the ball, Marcus stood up from the bench. He walked to the edge of the technical area and whistled sharply 2 short blasts, 1 long. Harry Maguire, Raphael Varane, Dennis Zakaria, and Cristiano Ronaldo immediately stopped what they were doing. They looked at the touchline. Marcus held up 2 fingers, crossing them over each other. The stack. Up in the stands, the fans watched as United's 4 biggest aerial threats did not spread out across the box. Instead, they all congregated at the penalty spot, standing in a tight, single-file line, one behind the other. It looked like a rugby lineout. Maguire was at the front. Varane behind him. Zakaria third. Ronaldo at the back. Atletico's zonal marking system completely short-circuited. Savic, Gimenez, and Kondogbia pointed frantically at each other, unsure of who was marking whom. The cluster of bodies made it impossible to man-mark without colliding with each other. Simeone recognized the danger instantly. Marca al hombre. Despierta. Man mark. Wake up, he screamed, frantically waving at his defenders to get tight. It was too late. Trippier raised his left arm. The signal. As Trippier began his run-up, the United stack exploded. It was choreographed chaos. Varane sprinted toward the near post, dragging Savic with him. Zakaria looped toward the penalty arc, pulling Kondogbia out of the danger zone. But the real magic happened in the center. Harry Maguire did not run toward the ball. He took 2 steps to his left and braced his body, planting his feet firmly into the wet turf. He crossed his arms over his chest, turning his back to the ball. Gimenez, Atletico's best header of the ball, tried to track Cristiano Ronaldo's run. But Maguire was standing exactly in his path. Gimenez slammed directly into Maguire's broad back, a legal, devastating screen that stopped the Uruguayan dead in his tracks. Because of Maguire's screen, Cristiano Ronaldo was completely unmarked. Ronaldo didn't run toward the goal. He peeled off to the back post, reading the flight of Trippier's cross with predatory instinct. The ball was driven with pace, curving away from Oblak's reach. At the back post, the only defender left in Ronaldo's zone was Ronald Lodi, the 5 feet 8 inches left back. It was a total mismatch. An execution. Ronaldo planted his left foot and launched himself into the Manchester sky. He seemed to hang in the air for an eternity, defying gravity, his knees tucked at the height of Lodi's chest. The physics of the jump were inhuman. 1. Trippier's cross met Ronaldo's forehead with a sickening, resounding thud. Ronaldo violently snapped his neck muscles, generating his own power, and sent a thundering bullet header back across the goal, downward, bouncing right in front of the line. Jan Oblak dove, but the ball was past him before he even fully extended his arm. It rippled the back of the net, tearing the water off the mesh in a violent spray. Manchester United 1-1 Atletico Madrid, aggregate, 3-1. Old Trafford detonated. The sound was a physical force, a wall of pure noise that shook the television cameras mounted on the gantry. Ronaldo sprinted straight toward the corner flag, his face locked in focus. He launched himself into the air, spinning sharply before slamming his arms down to his sides. Su'u! 75,000 fans screamed it with him, shaking the stadium to its foundations. His teammates swarmed him in the rain, burying him in a mass of red shirts. Dybala jumped onto his back, while Bruno screamed into the crowd. As the celebration finally broke apart and the players jogged back toward the center circle for the restart, Ronaldo didn't look at the crowd. He looked straight at the touchline. He locked eyes with Marcus Vale. Ronaldo pointed a finger directly at his young manager, acknowledging the brilliance of the set-piece design that had freed him, before clenching his hand into a tight, intense, triumphant fist. Maguire, grinning from ear to ear, jogged past Marcus and gave him a massive, heavy pat on the shoulder. Marcus maintained his usual sleepy indifference, though the faintest ghost of a smirk played at the corner of his mouth. He looked past the celebrating players, locking eyes with Diego Simeone. Simeone looked like he had just swallowed glass. The Argentine knew exactly what had happened. He hadn't been beaten by passion or luck. He had been tactically, surgically dismantled on a drawing board days before kickoff. He had set a trap for Tells, but Vale had set a trap for his entire zonal marking system. The referee blew the whistle for halftime a minute later. The teams headed for the tunnel. The Stretford end was singing a deafening rendition of Viva Ronaldo. Marcus turned and walked slowly down the touchline, hands in his pockets, the magnet clicking quietly once more. Click, clack. The machine was working perfectly. Trending worldwide, number UCL, number MUFC, Ronaldo, Tells, tactical screen, Simeone, Dybala. At United Stand Mufk, that is a training ground master class. Maguire set a screen like LeBron James. Ronaldo Airlines is back in business. 1-1. Large red circle airplane number MUFC. At tactical roll, Simeone tried to fix his mistakes from the first leg by dropping his defense deep, but Marcus Vale countered it instantly by dropping Dybala into midfield to create a 5v3 overload. The tactical level of this tie is unbelievable. At Scouse John LFC, typical United. Tells makes a massive mistake, they look dead, and then they score off a set-piece block that should have been a foul on Gimenez. Lucky. 1. At Cities and Blue, I hate to admit it, but that set-piece routine was beautiful. Using Maguire as a literal brick wall to free up Ronaldo against Lodi? That's pure coaching. At CR7_GOAT_, the hang time. The power. Suoyu. Goat. At Mark Goldbridge, Tells, my heart stopped mate. But look at the reaction. They just tapped their heads and kept playing. Mentality monsters. At Madridista_Real, Felix's goal was pure class. But Ronaldo punishing Atletico Madrid is basically a law of physics at this point. Death, taxes, and CR7 ruining Simeone's life. At Bruno Fernandes prop, did anyone see Vale on the touchline after we conceded? Didn't even blink. Just tapped his temple. The players instantly calmed down. The aura is actually frightening. At Simeone Banner, the referee is blind. Maguire obstructed Gimenez. That is a clear foul. UEFA hates Atletico Madrid. 2. At Stretford Paddock, Dybala dropping deep as a false 9 is completely ruining Atletico's shape. They have no idea who is supposed to mark him. What a signing he's been. At Fabrizio Romano, Cristiano Ronaldo makes it 1-1 right before HT. The set-piece routine was perfectly executed. Manchester United is fully in control of the tie now. 3-1 aggregate. Large red circle glowing star. At Cristiano_fan, some players see Atletico and feel pressure. Cristiano thinks about how to celebrate. Marcus Vale literally predicted the future in the press conference. At Barca_worldwide, honestly, I need a documentary on whatever Vale is doing in those Carrington tactical sessions. They look like a Pep Guardiola team with Mourinho's defensive solidity. At Axiom Watch, notice the lack of panic. That is the true impact of the Vale era. He has completely reprogrammed their emotional response to adversity. Number MUFC. At The Athletic, breakdown of the equalizer, Man Utd deployed the stack, forcing a chaotic 1v1 at the back post. By screening Gimenez, they isolated Ronaldo on Lodi. A tactical checkmate by Marcus Vale. At Redival_retro, Michael Carrick looked like he was about to have a heart attack when Tells gave the ball away. Marcus Vale looked like he was deciding what to have for dinner. Ice in his veins. Teacup without handle. At Adulty_English, heartbreak right before the half. We need 2 goals in 45 minutes to force extra time. A massive second half needed from the boys. Appa Adulty. Large red circle medium white circle. At Sky Sports Spl, they are chasing ghosts out there. Jamie Carragher full of praise for Manchester United's ball retention and Dybala's movement after going a goal down. At UTD_Trey, Dennis Zakaria is an absolute tank. He's carrying Coke and DePaul in his back pocket right now. Best £6 million we've ever spent. At football_tweet, if Manchester United win the Champions League with a 27-year-old manager playing chess, they might actually have to build a statue of him outside Old Trafford. Chapter 47, Mun vs ATM, 2-second leg. The 15-minute interval inside the bowels of Old Trafford offered two entirely different atmospheres. In the away dressing room, the walls shook. Diego Simeone was a man possessed. He hurled a water bottle against the lockers, his voice a hoarse, rapid-fire volley of Spanish expletives. He tore into his defense for falling for the set-piece trap, berated his midfield for letting United dictate the tempo, and furiously began redrawing his tactical shape on the whiteboard. The message was clear: aggression. Chaos. We need 2 goals. Turn the second half into a war. Down the corridor in the home dressing room, there was no shouting. There were no flying water bottles. Marcus Vail stood in the center of the room. His eyes, usually half-closed and lazy, were sharp and focused as he looked at his players. They will abandon the deep block immediately, Marcus said, his voice a calm, smooth baritone that cut perfectly through the residual adrenaline in the room. Simeone is desperate now. He will push Laurent and DePaul incredibly high to support João Felix. They will press us man-to-man right from the kickoff to try and force a mistake at the back. Marcus stepped over to the tactical board, picking up a black marker. Let them press, he instructed. Do not bypass the press with long, hopeful clearances. Invite them in. When Koch and DePaul step up to engage Bruno and Donny, the space between their midfield and defensive line will expand. Dennis, you are the bait. Draw them to you, then play the wall pass to Jadon. He turned to look directly at his vice-captain. Bruno. If Jadon receives the ball on the half-turn, Atletico's centre-backs will drop off to protect against Cristiano's run. They are terrified of him after that header. That will leave the top of the penalty arc completely open. Marcus tapped the board right at the edge of the D. If you see the space, do not hesitate. Bruno nodded sharply, his eyes burning with intensity. No emotion, Marcus reminded them as the warning bell rang in the corridor. They will try to kick you. They will try to bait you. You are a machine. The machine does not feel, it executes. Let's finish them. As the two teams emerged from the tunnel into the freezing Manchester rain, the tension inside Old Trafford was palpable. The Stretford end was roaring, sensing blood, but the travelling Spanish fans were equally loud, urging their team to fight. The referee blew his whistle. Atletico Madrid kicked off, and instantly, the game state changed. Simeone's men flew out of the traps like starving wolves. Gone was the rigid, passive 5-4-1. They pushed into a frantic, high-pressing 3-4-3, suffocating United's defenders high up the pitch. Rodrigo de Paul and Koch hunted the ball relentlessly, snapping at the heels of Harry Maguire and Rafael Varane. Marcus sat in his seat. His eyes were darting back and forth across the pitch. He wasn't watching the ball, he was watching the spaces. He was scanning the distances between Atletico's players, calculating the exact moment their aggressive press would overextend. In the 49th minute, David De Gea was forced to play a hurried pass out to Alex Telles under extreme pressure from Marcos Laurent. Telles barely managed to poke the ball down the line to Donny van de Beek, who immediately took a heavy challenge from Reinildo. They're turning the screw here, Jim, Peter Drury noted from the commentary gantry. Atletico are completely abandoning caution. They have pinned United back inside their own defensive third. Simeone was violently waving his arms on the touchline, urging his team to squeeze higher. Higher. Suffocate them. Marcus saw it. The gap. Because Koch had pushed up to press Van de Beek, a massive void had opened up in the center of the pitch. Dennis! Marcus shouted from his seat, his voice slicing through the noise. He pointed directly into the center circle. In the 51st minute, the trap was sprung. Van de Beek, falling to the turf under the weight of Reinildo's challenge, managed to hook a desperate pass inside to Denis Zakaria. Immediately, De Paul and Koch collapsed on the massive Swiss midfielder, trying to sandwich him and win the ball in a lethal area. But Zakaria, acting as the ultimate pressure relief valve, used his massive frame to shield the ball for a split second before executing a perfect, first-time wall pass straight through the pressing lines. The ball found Jadon Sancho, completely unmarked in the center circle. Sancho took one touch on the half-turn, instantly transitioning United from defense to attack. Just as Marcus had predicted, Atletico's three centre-backs Savic, Gimenez, and Reinildo panicked. Terrified by Cristiano Ronaldo making a sudden darting run toward the penalty box, the entire defensive line dropped 5 yards to protect the space in behind. They left the edge of the penalty area completely unguarded. Sancho drove forward with blistering pace, forcing the Atletico defense to keep backpedaling. At the very last second, instead of forcing a pass to Ronaldo or Dybala, Sancho dragged his boot over the ball and laid a soft, perfectly weighted pass backward, right to the edge of the D. Arriving with the momentum of a freight train was Bruno Fernandes. Bruno didn't take a touch. He didn't need to look up. He had seen the space evolving exactly as Marcus had outlined on the whiteboard 10 minutes earlier. He opened his hips, planted his left foot firmly into the slick grass, and threw his entire body weight through the shot. The connection was absolute perfection. The ball exploded off Bruno's right boot. It didn't spin. It moved through the Manchester rain like a guided missile, a vicious, swerving knuckleball that dipped and dipped violently at the very last second. Jan Oblak, widely considered one of the best shot stoppers in the world, threw his massive frame to his left. He was at full extension. He got absolutely nowhere near it. The ball crashed off the underside of the crossbar with a sickening, metallic crack, slamming down over the goal line before tearing into the roof of the net. Manchester United 2-1 Atletico Madrid, aggregate, 4-1. Old Trafford erupted into a state of absolute delirium. It was a roar of pure, unadulterated relief and ecstasy. The sound physically shook the stadium. Bruno Fernandes sprinted toward the Stretford end, his face contorted in a scream of pure passion, sliding on his knees across the wet grass before being completely buried by Sancho, Ronaldo, and Dybala. 1. Bruno Fernandes. Peter Drury roared, his voice cracking with the magnitude of the strike. A thunderbolt. A Hollywood finish for the Portuguese maestro. Manchester United carved through the high press like a hot knife through butter, and Old Trafford is in dreamland. 4-1 on aggregate. On the touchline, Diego Simeone dropped to his knees. He stared blankly at the wet grass, the reality of the tie slipping entirely through his fingers. He had pushed for the goal, and in doing so, he had walked perfectly into Marcus Vale's trap. Marcus did not celebrate. While Old Trafford lost its collective mind, the young manager had a completely expressionless face. His eyes were already scanning the Atletico bench, watching Simeone's assistants furiously shuffling their substitution cards. The clicking in Marcus's pocket returned. Click, clack, click. The math had changed. The endgame had begun. With 35 minutes remaining and requiring 3 goals just to force extra time, Atletico Madrid abandoned all tactical structure. It became a mission of survival. In the 58th minute, Simeone made a triple substitution. He withdrew his wing-backs, Lodi and Virgil Jaco, alongside holding midfielder Kondogbia. On came Angel Correa, Antoine Griezmann and Yannick Carrasco. 4. Atletico transitioned into a wild, staggering 4-2-4 formation. They were throwing the kitchen sink, the fridge, and the floorboards at Manchester United. Marcus watched the substitutions from his technical area. His mind instantly processed the new variables. 4 forwards. Extreme width from Carrasco and Correa. Marcos Llorente is dropping to right back to complete the back 4. Griezmann is operating as a shadow striker behind Felix. Koke and De Paul were left entirely alone in the midfield pivot. Michael, Marcus said softly, not taking his eyes off the pitch. Michael Carrick was instantly beside him, clipboard in hand. Boss. They have sacrificed their midfield control to overload our defensive line, Marcus analyzed, his voice cold and precise. They want to isolate Telles and Trippier in 1v1 situations out wide and bombard the box with crosses. We need to kill the wide channels. Marcus turned to the bench. Aaron. Fred. Get ready. In the 62nd minute, as Atletico won a throw-in deep in United's half, the electronic board went up. Off, Jadon Sancho, Donny van de Beek. On, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Scott McTominay. 1. The crowd gave Sancho and van de Beek a massive standing ovation, but the pundits in the gantry were instantly analyzing the shift. Fascinating changes from Marcus Vale, Jim Beglin noted. He is stripping away the creative flair to construct a fortress. McTominay comes on for his relentless physical energy to partner with Zakaria. But bringing on Wan-Bissaka for Sancho? He's shifting the entire shape. Down on the pitch, Marcus's instructions were relayed instantly. Manchester United dissolved their 4-4-2 diamond and morphed into an impenetrable 5-3-2 flat block. Aaron Wan-Bissaka slotted in as a third centre-back on the right side, directly behind Kieran Trippier. Alex Telles tucked in tighter to Maguire, with McTominay completely shadowing the left half space. Simeone's attempt to create 1v1 mismatches on the flanks hit a literal brick wall. Every time Carrasco tried to isolate Trippier, Wan-Bissaka was immediately there to provide a flawless double team. The English defender, famously nicknamed the Spider for his tackling range, completely neutralized Carrasco's pace, snapping into two crunching, perfectly timed slide tackles that sent the ball cleanly out for throw-ins. Frustration began to rot Atletico from the inside out. They couldn't play through the middle because Zakaria and McTominay were a black hole, legally bullying Koke and DePaul off the ball. They couldn't cross from the wide areas because the wing-backs were permanently doubled up. In the 68th minute, the dark arts returned. João Felix, increasingly isolated and frustrated, went in with his studs raised on McTominay, catching the towering Scot high on the shin. McTominay went down hard, rolling on the wet grass. Instantly, Koke and DePaul sprinted over, screaming at McTominay to get up, accusing him of diving. Bruno Fernandes arrived a second later, shoving DePaul hard in the chest. A massive scrum of 20 players converged in the center circle, pushing, shoving, and trading insults. Simeone was on the touchline, screaming at the referee, trying to whip the chaos into a frenzy. This was his territory. This was how Atletico crawled back into games, by making the opponent lose their composure. Marcus went towards the touchline. He simply put two fingers to his mouth and let out a piercing, razor-sharp whistle. Raphael Varane and Harry Maguire immediately looked over. Marcus tapped his temple twice. Think. Don't feel. He then pointed firmly back toward their defensive positions. Maguire grabbed Bruno by the collar of his shirt and physically dragged him out of the scrum. Varane pulled McTominay to his feet. Within 10 seconds, the Manchester United players completely walked away from the brawl, returning to their rigid defensive shape, leaving the Atletico players arguing with a referee who was suddenly dealing with only one angry team. 1. The crowd roared in appreciation. United was refusing to play Simeone's game. The referee booked Felix for the tackle and Koke for the ensuing argument. United retained possession. The emotional control of this Manchester United side is completely alien to what we saw under previous managers, Jamie Carragher marvelled on the international feed. They are being kicked, provoked, and antagonized, but Marcus Vale has told them to ignore it. Simeone is trying to start a fire, and Vale is just suffocating the room of oxygen. By the 75th minute, Paulo Dybala was running on fumes. He had spent the entire match operating in the grueling false nine role, constantly dropping deep to absorb tackles from Savic and Gimenez. Marcus made his final, ruthless moves. Off, Paulo Dybala, Bruno Fernandes, Kieran Trippier. On, Marcus Rashford, Nemanja Matic, Victor Lindelof. Simeone looked over at the United bench in disbelief. He was watching a tactical strangulation. Marcus transitioned his team into a terrifying 5-3-2 low block. Lindelof slotted in as a pure centre-back, pushing Wan-Bissaka out to the right wing-back role to replace Trippier. Matic joined McTominay and Zakaria to form a three-man defensive midfield screen that completely walled off the centre of the pitch. And up front, Marcus Rashford joined Cristiano Ronaldo. Look at the pacing of these substitutions, Peter Drury observed in awe. Atletico are utterly exhausted, their defensive line is parked on the halfway line to chase the game, and Marcus Vale has just unleashed the pace of Marcus Rashford. It is a psychological torture chamber for those Spanish defenders. It worked flawlessly. Atletico were paralyzed. They desperately needed to push their centre-backs forward to overload the penalty area, but the terrifying threat of Rashford standing on the shoulder of Gimenez kept them pinned back. If they committed bodies forward, Matic would simply launch a ball over the top for Rashford to run onto. For the final 15 minutes of the match, Old Trafford witnessed a defensive masterclass that drew comparisons to peak AC Milan. Atletico resorted to launching desperate, hopeful long balls from deep areas. It was exactly what United wanted. Harry Maguire, Raphael Varane and Victor Lindelof formed an anti-aircraft battery in the penalty area. They headed absolutely everything away. In the 86th minute, DePaul tried to thread a clever reverse pass into the box. Nemanja Matic, reading the game with veteran brilliance, stepped across the lane, intercepted the ball, and drew a clever foul from Griezmann to completely kill the momentum. As the clock ticked into stoppage time, the Manchester United fans brought out the Oles. 1. Ole. As McTominay passed to Zakaria. Ole. As Zakaria bypassed Koke and passed to Wan-Bissaka. Ole. As Wan-Bissaka casually rolled the ball back to De Gea. It was utterly humiliating for the Spanish champions. They were being passed off the park, reduced to chasing shadows in the Manchester rain. Marcus remained impassive. His eyes continued to scan the pitch, tracking the final seconds, ensuring the defensive line maintained its geometry. He didn't look at the clock, he waited for the sound. Peep. 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 The Romanian referee blew the final whistle. Full time, Manchester United 2-1 Atletico Madrid. Aggregate, 4-1. Old Trafford detonated. The Champions League anthem blared over the PA system, drowned out instantly by the deafening roar of 75,000 fans. Marcus Vale finally stopped scanning. He let out a slow, quiet breath, the tension leaving his shoulders. He turned toward the opposition dugout. Diego Simeone was walking toward him. The Argentine manager looked utterly drained, his black suit soaked by the rain. For 2 legs, he had thrown every trick, every dark art, and every ounce of aggression he had at this young Portuguese manager. And he had been systematically dismantled. Marcus extended his hand. Simeone took it. The handshake was firm. There was no trash talk. Simeone looked into Marcus's eyes, searching for arrogance, for gloating. He found nothing but absolute, cold respect. Felicidades, congratulations, Simeone muttered tightly, giving a brief nod. Your team plays with ice. Gracias, Diego, Marcus replied smoothly in perfect Spanish. You made us suffer perfectly. Simeone let out a hollow, appreciative chuckle at the callback to the press conference, shaking his head as he walked down the tunnel. Marcus turned back to the pitch. He gave a lazy wave to the roaring Stretford end, acknowledging their support without making it about himself. He waited for every single one of his players to cross the touchline, giving each of them a firm pat on the shoulder or a quick nod of approval. A seminal night at Old Trafford, Peter Drury concluded, his voice ringing with finality. Manchester United march into the Champions League quarter-finals. The ghost of knockout traumas past has been exorcised. They were tested by the ultimate masters of the dark arts, and they answered with an empire of ice. Marcus Vale's unbeaten machine rolls on. Marcus slipped his hands into his pockets, the red magnet clicking quietly once more, and disappeared into the tunnel. Trending worldwide, number MUFC, number UCL, Bruno Fernandes, Simeone, Marcus Vale, Masterclass, The Spider. At United Stand Mufk, quarter-finals here we come. Bruno you magician. 4-1 on aggregate against Atletico Madrid. The Marcus Vale era is unstoppable. Large red circle fire number MUFC. At Tactical Roll, Marcus Vale bringing on Wan-Bissaka as a right-sided centre-back to create a double team on Carrasco was a good tactical change. Simeone's 4-2-4 was completely neutralized in 2 minutes. A terrifying level of game management. At Scouse John LFC, have to admit, United look entirely different. They don't panic anymore. Bruno's goal was a fluke though. Oblak should have saved it. See you in the quarters. At Cities and Blue, annoying how solid their defense is now. Maguire and Varane look like prime Vidic and Ferdinand because they actually have a midfield shielding them. Pep needs to take notes on how to use a CDM. At Mark Goldbridge, get in there. Bruno with a thunder bastard. And how about the mentality? Atletico tried to start a fight with McTominay, and Vale just taps his head and the players walk away. No red cards, no panic. Elite. At CR7_GOAT_, Ronaldo didn't even score in the second half, and he still owns Atletico. Quarter-finals. The 6th UCL is loading. At Atleti_English, we fought until the end, but the tactics were simply outclassed today. United defended flawlessly in the second half. Congratulations to them. Focus on La Liga now. Large red circle medium white circle. At Bruno Fernandes prop, statistically not enough, he said in the presser. So Bruno goes and does that. The strike was pure venom. Rocket fire. At Stretford Paddock, did anyone see Marcus Vale on the touchline? He didn't even celebrate the goal. He was instantly looking at Simeone's bench to see what subs they were going to make. He is not human. At Fabrizio Romano, Manchester United eliminate Atletico Madrid. Marcus Vale remains undefeated. The board is thrilled with the progression. Massive bonuses activated for the squad. Large red circle glowing star. At Simeon Ebener, UEFA wants United in the QF, it's obvious. The referee gave us nothing. Felix was fouled all night. 5. At Rio 35, that is a mature, elite European performance. When Simeone threw 4 attackers on, Vale didn't panic. He built a wall. McTominay and Zakaria were monsters in there. Bring on anyone in the next round. Fist hands sign. At Barca_worldwide, honestly, I need Marcus Vale at Barcelona. The way he adjusts his shape mid-game is exactly what Xavi struggles with. That 5-3-2 shift was beautiful. 3. At Cristiano_fan, Diego Simeone literally looked like he was about to cry when he shook Vale's hand. The boss broke El Cholo. At Sky Sports Spl, they play with ice. An incredible turnaround in culture for Manchester United under Marcus Vale as they cruise into the final 8 of the Champions League. At football_tweet, Wan-Bissaka coming on just to slide tackle Carrasco into the shadow realm twice and then pass it sideways is peak Barkley's heritage. At The Athletic, breakdown of the second half, how Marcus Vale's flat 5 substitution completely neutralized Diego Simeone's aggressive 4-2-4, choking the wide channels and forcing hopeless long balls. At Redival_retro, no tea tonight for the boss on the touchline. Just pure, Terminator-level scanning. He was downloading Atletico's tactics in real time. At UTD_Trey, we are winning the Premier League and the Champions League. I don't care what anyone says. We are massive again. At SPNFK, Real Madrid knock PSG out of the Champions League. Even with Messi, Neymar, Mbappe, Ramos, Pogba, and Donnarumma on the pitch, the Parisian project collapses in the knockout stages again. Elite football is about tactical cohesion, not just assembling superstars. Crown 3. At UTD District, remember when Marcus Vale said PSG and Manchester City are just trying to buy success and PSG and City mocked him for it? Well, PSG just got dumped out of Europe despite spending billions. Vale looks more vindicated every single day. Large red circle. At tactical_times, PSG's exit proves tactical balance beats paper lineups. Zero defensive work rate from the front 3 meant their midfield pivot was constantly overrun on the attacking transition. Real Madrid's compact mid-block completely choked their vertical passing lanes. Marcus Vale was spot on. At Stretford Paddock, Messi, Neymar, Mbappe, Pogba, Ramos, Donnarumma, all that money just to get completely unpicked by Real Madrid's counter-pressing. They laughed at Marcus Vale for telling the truth about functional squad building. Who's laughing now? At Fabrizio Romano, incredible night in Madrid. Real Madrid advance. PSG's dream is over despite a historic transfer window. The debate around building a balanced tactical shape versus collecting elite individuals opens up again across European football. Police cars revolving light. Chapter 48, Post-match. Long after the final whistle had blown and the 75,000 fans had spilled out into the freezing Manchester night, Old Trafford remained a hive of frenetic, invisible energy. Up in the stands, the cleaning crews were already moving systematically through the rows of red plastic seats, sweeping away discarded pie wrappers, match-day programs, and empty plastic pint glasses. The massive floodlights had been dialed down to a low, humming amber, casting long, dramatic shadows across the pitch. But deep within the concrete bowels of the stadium, inside the UEFA-designated press auditorium, the temperature was rising. The media room was completely packed. Journalists from across the globe stood shoulder to shoulder, the air thick with the smell of damp wool coats, stale coffee, and raw anticipation. The clicking of laptop keyboards sounded like a localized rainstorm. They were waiting for the post-mortem. Manchester United had just systematically dismantled the reigning Spanish champions, and Europe's media demanded explanations. The heavy door beside the stage opened with a sharp click. A hush fell over the room instantly. Camera shutters began to fire in a rapid, blinding staccato. Diego Simeone walked into the room. The Argentine manager looked entirely spent. His usually immaculate black suit was still visibly damp from the Manchester rain, clinging heavily to his shoulders. His hair, usually slicked back with aggressive precision, hung slightly loose over his forehead. He did not look angry, nor did he look particularly devastated. He looked like a general who had just led his men into a brutal, grueling trench war, only to discover halfway through that the enemy was fighting with drones. He took his seat at the center table, adjusting the UEFA microphone with a heavy sigh. Beside him sat the translator, though Simeone's English was often good enough to understand the questions before they were translated. The Manchester United press officer nodded to the room. "We will take questions for Diego Simeone. Please wait for the microphone." A Spanish journalist from Marca raised his hand immediately. "Diego, hard condolences on the result. What are your overall thoughts on the match? You seem to have united trapped in the first half after João Felix scored, but the second half slipped away entirely. Simeone leaned into the microphone, his dark eyes scanning the room. The match was exactly the war we expected, Simeone began, his voice a low, gravelly rasp of rapid Spanish. I cannot fault the effort of my players. The effort was absolute. We competed. We suffered. In the first half, we executed the plan. We wanted to deny them the center, target the wide areas, and force an error. We got the error. We got the goal. He paused, shaking his head slightly, a wry, bitter smile touching his lips. But football is a game of moments. We lost focus for one set piece before halftime. And in the second half, we were fighting a wall. We pushed, we risked everything, but we could not find the spaces. An English reporter from The Guardian stood up. Diego, speaking of that set piece right before halftime. Cristiano Ronaldo once again proves to be the thorn in Atletico Madrid's side. How do you explain his constant impact against your teams? Simeone let out a long, heavy exhale, leaning back in his chair. He rubbed his face with his hands. What can I say about Cristiano that has not been said 1,000 times? Simeone asked, his tone laced with a mixture of exhaustion and reluctant respect. He is a monster. He is a historical anomaly. You can prepare for him for 3 weeks. You can structure your entire defensive block to deny him space. But if you give him 1 meter in the penalty box, he punishes you. He is inevitable in those moments. But I must also credit the design of the play. It was a very clever screen. They used our zonal rules against us. The translator relayed the message, and the room murmured in agreement. A reporter from AS took the microphone next. Diego, you just mentioned the tactical design. You shook Marcus Vale's hand at the end of the match and seemed to exchange some words. What are your thoughts on him, and how he managed this tie? Simeone's expression hardened, his eyes narrowing as he thought about the young Portuguese manager. He is 27 years old, Simeone said slowly, but his mind is very, very old. The journalists leaned in, keyboards clacking furiously to catch the quote. Normally, when a team has a 2-goal lead, they become nervous. They become emotional when you press them. I try to make teams emotional. If you make a team emotional, they make mistakes, Simeone explained, tapping his temple. But Marcus Vale, he does not allow his team to feel. They play with ice. When we scored, they did not panic. When we tackled them hard, they walked away. It is very difficult to break a team that refuses to engage in the psychological fight. He suffocated our emotion. Tactically, where did it go wrong for Atletico in the second half? A tactical analyst from The Athletic asked. You shifted to a very aggressive 4-2-4, but you couldn't create any chances. Because he closed the door, Simeone answered bluntly, his hands moving to trace imaginary lines on the desk. When I brought on Griezmann and Carrasco, I wanted to create chaos in the wide channels. I wanted 2 versus 1 situations against Telles and Trippier. I expected him to defend with his 4. But instantly, he brought on Wan-Bissaka. He changed his shape to a flat line of 5. Simeone shook his head, a look of frustration crossing his face. It killed our width entirely, he admitted. Wan-Bissaka neutralized Carrasco perfectly. And because we had sacrificed our midfield to play 4 attackers, Zakaria and McTominay simply swallowed the center of the pitch. We were forced to play long balls into Maguire and Varane, which is exactly what United wanted. It was a checkmate. We gambled, and he had the perfect countermeasure. One final question, Diego, a Portuguese journalist called out. Do you think this Manchester United team can go all the way and win the Champions League? Simeone stood up slowly, adjusting his damp suit jacket. In this competition, whoever makes the fewest mistakes wins, Simeone said quietly. Manchester United do not make many mistakes right now. We will see how they handle the bigger possession teams. Thank you. Simeone gave a brief, respectful nod to the room and exited through the side door, leaving the journalists frantically typing up his quotes. The interlude lasted exactly 4 minutes. The energy in the room shifted completely. The somber, heavy atmosphere left behind by Simeone was replaced by a sharp, electric anticipation. The undefeated manager was coming. The heavy side door clicked open once more. Marcus Vale strolled into the room. He moved with his trademark, infuriatingly lazy gait, his heavy navy overcoat hanging slightly loose on his frame. Click, clack, click. The sound of the red tactical magnet rolling over his knuckles was faintly audible before he even reached the desk. He didn't look triumphant. He didn't look like a man who had just guided a club to the quarter-finals of the Champions League. His eyes were half closed, hooded with a sense of boredom, as if he had been dragged out of a very comfortable nap to explain basic arithmetic to a room full of toddlers. He sat down heavily in the chair. "Congratulations on the victory, Marcus," the press officer said over the microphone. "We will now take questions for the Manchester United manager." Immediately, a sea of hands shot into the air. A journalist from the Times was selected first. "Marcus, congratulations. A massive result tonight. Can you walk us through the decision to shift to a 5-man defense in the 62nd minute? It completely shut the game down." Marcus placed his teacup down softly. He stared blankly at the journalist. "Diego Simeone introduced 4 forwards," Marcus answered, his voice a smooth, low baritone that instantly dominated the acoustics of the room. "He attempted to stretch the pitch to its maximum horizontal limits to isolate our fullbacks. If I kept a back 4, the distances between our defenders would exceed optimal recovery zones. So, I added a 5th defender. We didn't kill their players, we killed the space they wanted to operate in. Once the space was gone, their tactics collapsed." "Marcus, Neil Custis, the Sun," a reporter shouted from the second row. "Bruno Fernandes's goal. It was a thunderbolt from outside the box. Was that pure instinct or was it a planned sequence?" Marcus tilted his head slightly. The clicking in his pocket sped up for a fraction of a second. Click-clack. "Bruno has a terrible habit of attempting low-probability shots when he is frustrated," Marcus said dryly, causing a ripple of nervous laughter in the room. "However, the sequence leading to the shot was highly probable. We baited their press, Zakaria broke the first line, and Sancho exploited the space left by their advancing centre-backs. When Bruno arrived at the edge of the box, he was completely unmarked. An unmarked shot from 19 yards by Bruno Fernandes has a very high probability of success. The execution was his. The space was ours." A Spanish reporter from El País stood up. "Marcus, Diego Simeone was just in here. He said you suffocated his team's emotion. He said your team plays with ice. How have you managed to remove the panic from a team that, historically, has struggled immensely with going a goal down?" Marcus rested his chin on his hand. "Emotion is a variable," Marcus explained, his tone hypnotic, almost professorial. "In football, variables cause errors. When a player feels fear, his heart rate increases. When his heart rate increases, his peripheral vision narrows. When his vision narrows, he misplaces a pass. I do not care about passion. Passion is entirely useless if you cannot control the ball under pressure. I simply taught them to view the game as a series of solvable equations. If we concede a goal, the equation changes. We do not panic, we simply calculate the new solution." "Jamie Jackson, The Guardian," another reporter called out. "The equalizer right before halftime. It looked like a very specific, orchestrated set-piece routine. Can you claim the credit for the stack that freed up Cristiano?" Marcus blinked slowly. "No." "1. He took another sip of tea. The room waited for him to elaborate. "He didn't. Care to expand on that?" Jackson prompted. "I hired an Eastern European Olympic wrestling coach 2 months ago," Marcus stated flatly, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. "I told him our centre-backs were too polite in the penalty area. He designed the screening mechanism. He taught Harry Maguire how to legally plant his feet and absorb momentum to block a runner. I simply told them when to execute it. The credit belongs to the man who understands grappling, and to Cristiano, who doesn't care about gravity." "Marcus, you brought on Scott McTominay in the second half. Alongside Zakaria, they seemed to physically bully Atletico's midfield. How vital are those two to your system?" "They are the janitors," Marcus said smoothly. A few reporters chuckled at the analogy. "I mean that with the utmost respect," Marcus clarified, leaning forward slightly. "Football has an obsession with artists. Everyone wants to paint the beautiful picture. But if you have 11 artists, your house is going to be incredibly messy. Zakaria and McTominay have zero ego in their defending. They sweep the floors. They lock the doors. They absorb physical damage so the artists can think. They were flawless tonight." 1. A French journalist from L'Équipe raised her hand. You remain completely undefeated as a manager, Marcus. The streak is extending across multiple competitions. Does the weight of that unbeaten record become a burden for you or the players? It is only a burden if you care about it, Marcus replied, his eyes half closing again. A streak offers no tactical advantage in the next match. If I spend my time worrying about a zero in the loss column, I am not preparing for the next opponent. The streak is irrelevant. I only cares about the next 90 minutes of the game. Marcus, given the dominance in the second half against a team like Atletico, a reporter from Sky Sports asked, is this the peak of what this Manchester United team can achieve? Are they playing exactly how you envisioned? Marcus stopped clicking the magnet. The silence in the room stretched for a second. He looked directly at the Sky Sports reporter. Peak. Marcus repeated, his voice dropping an octave, carrying a sudden, chilling weight. No. They are currently operating at perhaps 40% of the tactical capacity I expect from them. They are surviving because they are disciplined, but they are not yet fully fluent. When they reach their peak, you will not need to ask me if they have. The room went entirely silent, the keyboards temporarily silenced by the arrogance of the statement, delivered with calmness. The press officer quickly pointed to another reporter to break the tension. Marcus, the draw for the quarter-finals is on Friday. Are there any teams you want to avoid? Bayern Munich, Manchester City, Real Madrid. Marcus shrugged, the sleepy facade instantly returning. I am a football manager, not a magician. I do not control the plastic balls in the UEFA Bowl, he deadpanned. Whoever we draw, we will analyze. Until then, I do not waste cognitive energy on hypotheticals. We noticed you didn't celebrate Bruno's goal, or Ronaldo's goal, a reporter from the Daily Mail noted. The whole stadium was shaking, but you just stood there looking at the opposition bench. Why? If I am jumping up and down and screaming at the fans, I am not watching Diego Simeone's assistants preparing substitution cards. I am paid millions of pounds to think. I am not paid to dance. The press officer stepped forward. Final question, please. A veteran journalist from the BBC stood up. Marcus, given the tactical display tonight, and the fact that you have beaten Chelsea, Arsenal, City and now Atletico Madrid, can Manchester United win the Champions League this season? Marcus Vail stood up from the chair, slipping his free hand back into his coat pocket. He looked out over the sea of flashing cameras and waiting journalists. I still stand by the statement I gave in my first press conference. Thank you. Drive safely in the rain. Without another word, Marcus turned and walked off the stage, disappearing through the heavy side door, leaving the media auditorium buzzing with a frantic, electrified energy. 10:15 p.m. CBS Sports Golazo Studio, London 1. The broadcast cut from the live feed of the Old Trafford press room back to the brightly lit, state-of-the-art CBS Sports studio. Kate Abdo sat at the center of the desk, looking directly into the main camera. Well, if you thought Marcus Vail was going to track back his statement, you were sorely mistaken, Kate said, a smile playing on her lips. Energy conservation, he calls it. Welcome back to UEFA Champions League today. What a night of football we have had across Europe. She turned to the massive digital screen behind the desk, which displayed the night's results. Manchester United 2-1 Atletico Madrid, AG, 4-1. Ajax 0-1 Benfica, AG, 2-3. Juventus 0-3 Villarreal, AG, 1-4. Before we dive deep into the tactical masterclass at Old Trafford, let's quickly touch on the other games, Kate prompted. Thierry, an absolute shock in Amsterdam. Benfica knock out Ajax. Thierry Henry nodded, adjusting his sharp suit jacket. A classic smash and grab, Kate. Ajax had all the ball, all the possession, but Darwin Núñez, this kid is special. One set piece, one header, and Benfica are through. It shows you that in knockout football, possession means nothing if you don't have a killer in the box. 5. And over in Turin, a disaster for Juventus, Jamie Carragher chimed in, shaking his head. To lose 3-0 at home to Villarreal? Unai Emery is a genius in European knockout ties, but Juve were absolutely completely exposed on the counter-attack. Right, let's get back to Manchester, Kate said, pivoting the conversation. Micah, Diego Simeone said it himself. He gambled with a 4-2-4, and Marcus Vail instantly shut it down with a flat 5. We're looking at a manager who has completely changed the identity of this United team. Micah Richards let out a booming laugh, leaning forward on the desk. I have to hold my hands up. Micah shouted happily. I said it when he was appointed, I said, who is this kid from Belgium? But look at what he is doing. Wan-Bissaka comes on just to man Mark Carrasco out of the game. Scott McTominay comes on to just smash people in midfield. It's not pretty, it's not the United way we're used to, but it is so effective. Jamie Carragher pulled up a tactical graphic on the interactive screen embedded in the desk. Look at this shape in the last 20 minutes, Carragher said, using his pen to circle the United defensive line. It is a 5-3-2 low block. You have Maguire, Varane, and Lindelof in the middle. You have Zakaria, McTominay, and Matic sitting right in front of them. That is 6 players whose entire job is just to clear the ball and tackle. Simeone looked like he was going to cry on the touchline because there was literally zero space to play a pass. But here is the question, Thierry Henry interjected, raising a finger to make his point. It worked beautifully against Atletico Madrid because Atletico are a team that wants to play on the counter. Simeone does not know how to break down a low block because he usually plays the low block. Vale gave them the ball and said, okay, break us down. And they couldn't. Exactly, Carragher agreed enthusiastically. So, Kate Abdo smiled, looking at her 3 pundits. The draw is on Friday. The final 8 are set. Bayern Munich, Liverpool, Manchester City, Real Madrid, Chelsea, Villarreal, Benfica, and Manchester United. Let's get your picks. Who is the favorite to win the Champions League right now? Micah Richards didn't hesitate. Manchester City. I know United beat them in the derby, but over 2 legs in the Champions League? Pep Guardiola's squad depth is too much. They are starving for it. I'm going with Liverpool, Carragher stated firmly. Jurgen Klopp's team has the European pedigree, Anfield is a fortress on European nights, and Mo Salah is arguably the best player in the world right now. Thierry? Kate asked. Real Madrid, the Frenchman answered smoothly. You never bet against Real Madrid in the Champions League. Karim Benzema is playing like a man possessed. And Carlo Ancelotti knows exactly how to manage these big egos in the dressing room. 2. Kate leaned back, looking slightly amused. None of you are picking the only undefeated team left in Europe? Manchester United are only 7 points off the top of the Premier League, and they just destroyed the Spanish champions. Carragher shook his head immediately. No, Kate. Look, what Marcus Vale is doing is brilliant. But let's be totally honest. They beat an Atletico Madrid side that is having a poor domestic season. They are getting away with playing a defensive, counter-attacking system because Cristiano Ronaldo is bailing them out with freak goals. Jamie is right, Thierry agreed, nodding slowly. Look at the teams left. If Manchester United draw Bayern Munich, what happens? You cannot sit in a 5-3-2 low block against Bayern for 180 minutes. Robert Lewandowski will find a way. Thomas Muller will find the space. Against a true, elite possession team, Marcus Vale's defensive structure will eventually crack. 2. Plus, they don't have the midfield control. Micah added loudly. Yes, Bruno Guimaraes and Denis Zakaria have been great signings. But are they going to outpass Toni Kroos and Luka Modric? Are they going to outpossess Kevin De Bruyne and Bernardo Silva? No chance. Vale is a tactical genius, but his squad is still a Frankenstein team. 3. So, they are the dark horses, but not the favorites, Kate summarized. They aren't even dark horses for me, Carragher concluded brutally. They are a great story. Vale is incredible for the cameras. But if they draw City, Bayern, or Liverpool in the quarters, it's the end of the road for the unbeaten streak. 11:30 p.m. ESPN FC, Bristol, Connecticut. Across the Atlantic, the American sports broadcasting giant was running its flagship soccer show. Dan Thomas sat at the main desk, flanked by the usual grumpy array of former professionals, Craig Burley, Steve Nicol, and European football expert Gabriele Marcotti joining via satellite. Welcome to ESPN FC, Dan Thomas announced cheerfully. A massive night of Champions League action. Manchester United secure their spot in the quarter-finals with a 2-1 win on the night against Atletico Madrid, going through 4-1 on aggregate. Craig, I'll come to you first. Are Manchester United officially back? Craig Burley let out a long, highly exaggerated groan, rolling his eyes toward the studio ceiling. Oh, please, Dan, stop with the hyperbole, Burley grumbled, leaning heavily on the desk. Let's call this game exactly what it was. It wasn't a Manchester United masterclass, it was a bottle job by Diego Simeone. Atletico Madrid were atrocious. Come on, Craig, Dan laughed. You have to give Marcus Vale some credit. They neutralized them completely in the second half. Neutralized them? Burley scoffed loudly. He parked a double-decker bus. He brought on Wan-Bissaka to play as a third centre-back. He brought on McTominay and Matic to basically form a human wall on the edge of the penalty box. My grandmother could manage a team to defend if you put 8 players behind the ball. And then they just rely on Ronaldo to jump 10 feet in the air to score a set piece. It's dinosaur football dressed up in a fancy suit. 2. Steve Nicol nodded vigorously in agreement, his Scottish accent cutting through. Craig is absolutely spot on, Nicol argued. Listen, fair play to the boy Marcus Vale. He's got them organized, which is more than you can say for Solskjær. But look at the goal they conceded. Alex Telles takes a touch like a trampoline, gives the ball away, and João Felix scores. You make mistakes like that against Bayern Munich or Real Madrid, you are 3-0 down before half-time. You can't just cross your fingers and hope the other team misses. 1. Dan Thomas turned to the satellite screen. Gab Marcotti, surely you have a more nuanced take on this? Vale said in his press conference that his team is only playing at 40% of their capacity. Marcotti adjusted his glasses, looking slightly amused by the outrage in the studio. Well, Dan, unlike my esteemed colleagues here, I actually appreciate what Vale is doing, Marcotti said reasonably. Is it pretty? No. But it is pragmatic. He recognized that his squad cannot play a high-pressing, possession-based game without getting exposed defensively. So, he has built a transition machine. The way he used Paulo Dybala tonight as a false 9 to create overloads in the midfield was actually very sophisticated. Oh, sophisticated. Burley mocked, throwing his hands up. He bought a striker and told him to play in midfield. Groundbreaking. But Gab, Dan Thomas pressed, can this pragmatic style win the Champions League? No, Marcotti answered simply. I agree with the general consensus. To win the Champions League, you eventually have to go toe-to-toe with a heavyweight. You have to beat a Manchester City, a Liverpool, or a Bayern Munich over 2 legs. Vale's system relies on the opposition making mistakes and overcommitting. Teams like City and Bayern do not overcommit. They strangle you with possession. I think the quarter-finals are the ceiling for this Manchester United team. So nobody here is picking United for the trophy? Dan asked. Not a chance, Steve Nicol said firmly. Absolutely zero, Craig Burley agreed. If they draw Bayern Munich on Friday, they might concede 6. Dan Thomas laughed, looking directly into the camera as the outro music began to play. Well, there you have it. Marcus Vale remains undefeated, Manchester United march on, but the pundits remain entirely unconvinced. Join us on Friday for the live reaction to the Champions League quarter-final draw. Chapter 49, The Blueprint and the Ballot. The morning after Manchester United systematically dismantled Diego Simeone's Atletico Madrid, the rain over Carrington felt lighter, almost celebratory. Marcus Vale had kept his word. The squad was granted a full 24 hours of rest. No recovery runs, no video analysis, no mandatory gym sessions. For a squad that had been pushed to its cognitive and physical limits under Marcus's relentless tactical drilling, the silence of a day off was the greatest reward they could have asked for. But while the players slept, the corporate machinery of Axiom Global Partners did not. At exactly 9 a.m. on Thursday, 3 black Mercedes V-Class personnel carriers quietly rolled into the executive parking lot of the Trafford Town Hall on Talbot Road. There was no media presence, no cameras, and no public fanfare. Out of the vehicles stepped a delegation of 6 individuals. They were not football executives, they were elite corporate attorneys from Axiom's London offices, accompanied by master urban planners from BDP, the architectural firm privately commissioned by Alexander Vance under Marcus's strict directives. For decades, the Glazers had let Old Trafford slowly decay, a grand but rusting monument to past glories. The roof leaked, the concourses were cramped, and the surrounding area remained underutilized. Inside a private committee room, the Axiom delegation met with senior representatives of the Trafford Council's planning committee and local development officers. The agenda was simple: the formal submission of Axiom's architectural master plan and the initial application for a no-objection certificate, NOC, and full planning permission to construct a state-of-the-art, 100,000-seat stadium on the club's existing vacant land. 1. The plan was staggering in its scope. It didn't just propose a stadium, it detailed an entire regeneration of the Trafford Wharfside area, a high-tech sports city, complete with public plazas, community sports hubs, and a modern transport interchange. Because the new stadium would be built on the vacant land beside Old Trafford, the historic ground could continue to host matches during the multi-year construction process, ensuring no loss of matchday revenue or emotional displacement for the fans. 1. By noon, the preliminary administrative files had been officially logged. In a bureaucratic environment where major developments usually took years of back-and-forth negotiation, the completeness of Axiom's environmental, economic impact, and structural safety studies designed by Marcus's predictive models left the local authority officers stunned. The path to the NOC was not just open, it was being fast-tracked. Of course, in a city like Manchester, secrets of this magnitude do not stay buried for long. By late afternoon, a junior administrative assistant at the council had leaked a screenshot of the planning application's cover page to a local journalist. By 6 p.m., the story exploded across the sports desk of the Manchester Evening News. By 7 p.m., the global media was in a state of meltdown. When the players returned to training on Friday morning, the atmosphere at Carrington was electric. As they walked out to the training pitches, the players weren't talking about the Champions League draw or their upcoming FA Cup quarter-final. They were huddled around their phones, staring at leaked architectural renderings of a futuristic, glass and steel colossus that was rumored to be built right next to the current stadium. "Have you seen this?" Scott McTominay asked, showing his screen to Jadon Sancho. "They're saying it has a single-tier homestand that holds 30,000 people." 30,000? That's basically a whole stadium on its own. "Look at the roof," Sancho murmured, eyes wide. "It looks like a spaceship. If this is real, it's going to make the Allianz Arena look like a League Two ground." "Is it real, though?" Marcus Rashford asked, joining the group alongside Bruno Fernandes. "We've heard stadium rumors for 10 years. The Glazers used to talk about exploring options every time they wanted to distract us from a bad transfer window." "It's real," Bruno said, his voice quiet and confident. The players turned to look at their vice-captain. "How do you know?" McTominay asked. "Because the owners are Axiom," Bruno smiled, gesturing toward the Renovate training building. "They don't explore options, Scott. They buy, they build, and they win. Since they arrived, have they made a single promise they didn't keep?" Before anyone could answer, Marcus Vail walked out of the main glass doors of the training complex. He wore his standard black training top, his hands casually shoved into his pockets. In his right hand, he was lazily tossing his small, circular red tactical magnet, catching it with a flick of his wrist and rolling it over his knuckles in a smooth, rhythmic motion. "Good morning," Marcus said jovially, walking right into the center of the huddle. He looked at the players' phones and smiled. "Are we studying tactics, or are we looking at real estate?" The players laughed, the tension instantly evaporating. Despite his terrifying intellect on match days, Marcus was incredibly easy to be around on the training ground. He didn't rule with an authoritarian fist, he was relaxed, accessible, and constantly joked with the squad. He didn't care what they did in their personal lives, what cars they drove, or what they posted on social media, so long as they didn't bring disrepute to the football club and executed his drilled patterns on the pitch. "Boss, is this true?" Rashford asked, turning his phone to show Marcus the leaked article. "Are we actually building a new stadium next to Old Trafford?" Marcus caught the red magnet and held it between his thumb and forefinger, looking at the screen with an amused expression. "Ah, the Trafford Council has leaky pipes, it seems," Marcus chuckled. "As far as I know, it is true. The administrative team submitted the blueprints yesterday morning to obtain the no objection certificate. We already own the vacant land, so there is no need to wait. Once the local authorities sign off on the safety and zoning regulations, the diggers will start." The players exchanged stunned, euphoric glances. It was one thing to read it in the papers, it was another to hear their manager confirm it so casually. "Are we knocking down the old stadium?" Harry Maguire asked. "Not immediately," Marcus explained, tossing the magnet gently in the air. "You will continue to play in Old Trafford while the new one rises beside it. Once the new ground is ready, we will transition. As for the historic site, we plan to preserve the sacred parts: the Holy Trinity statue, the Munich Tunnel, and the pitch itself, which will be converted into a community park and a monument to the club's history. The inner parts will be changed to museum. We don't erase the past, Harry. We build the future on top of it. 3. A/N, yet I changed my mind regarding what to do with Old Trafford. 4. That is incredible, Raphael Varane muttered, genuinely impressed by the respect shown to the club's heritage. It is very simple, Marcus smiled, his eyes shining with a rare spark of warmth. A club of this stature deserves a theatre that doesn't leak when it rains. But for now, that spaceship of a stadium is just drawings on paper. The only way we get to play in it is if we keep winning football matches. If we start losing, the owners might decide to build a shopping mall instead. The squad burst into laughter. Now, Marcus's tone shifted seamlessly from relaxed banter to sharp focus as he placed the red magnet against his palm. We have a tactical session to run. Leicester City on Sunday in the FA Cup. They play a very specific transitional block under Brendan Rodgers. Let us go and show them how we dismantle it. While the squad ran through their passing patterns under the crisp Manchester sun, the digital world was in a state of absolute ecstasy. The confirmation of Axiom's planning application, coupled with the club's official statement acknowledging the submission for the NOC, sent shockwaves through social media. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, Manchester United fans felt overwhelming sense of pride in their ownership. At UTD District, breaking, Manchester United have officially submitted planning applications to Trafford Council for a new 100,000-seat stadium on the vacant club-owned land adjacent to Old Trafford. Axiom is funding the entire project with zero debt added to the club. This is history. Large red circle. At Gold Bridge, a 100k capacity stadium. I actually have tears in my eyes. The Glazers spent 18 years leeching from us, and Axiom does this in 3 months. We have our club back. We really do. At Statman Dave, Manchester United's land ownership around Old Trafford is roughly 100+ acres. By building the new stadium on the vacant land beside the current ground, United will not suffer any matchday revenue loss during construction. This is a masterclass in corporate planning. Chart with upward trend. At Fabrizio Romano, Manchester United Stadium project is 100% confirmed by sources close to Axiom. The No Objection Certificate, NOC, is expected to be granted rapidly due to the incredibly detailed urban regeneration plans submitted. Construction could begin as early as this summer. Large red circle number MUFC. At the King Cantona, from a leaking roof against Arsenal to building a futuristic 100,000-seat colossus. Axiom are literally rewriting the destiny of this club. What a time to be a Red. Mim at Troll Football at Anfield Talk. Must be nice having owners who actually invest in a new stadium instead of just adding a few thousand seats to an old main stand and calling it a day. Absolute joke how much financial power United have now. Unamused face 1. At CFC_fans, let's see if they can actually fill 100,000 seats when the Marcus Vale honeymoon period ends. Easy to build a big stadium, harder to keep winning for. At UTD Trey, Axiom is literally playing career mode with real-life cheat codes enabled. I can't believe we went from protesting in the streets to planning the biggest, most advanced stadium in Europe. Marcus Vale, I will literally wash your Volvo myself. The euphoria, however, was about to be met with a massive dose of cold reality. At exactly 11 a.m., the draw for the UEFA Champions League quarter-finals took place at the UEFA headquarters in Nyon, Switzerland. The sporting world watched as the balls were swirled in the transparent bowls. The draw was completely open. No seeding, no country protection. The first ball drawn was Chelsea. Their opponent, Real Madrid. 2. The second ball drawn was Villarreal. Their opponent, Benfica. The third ball drawn was Atletico Madrid's conquerors, Manchester United. The global audience held its breath as the official unscrewed the blue capsule, pulling out the paper slip. Manchester City. The final draw was Bayern Munich vs. Liverpool. The Manchester Derby. On the grandest stage in European football. 2 legs, 1 ticket to the semi-finals. Pep Guardiola vs Marcus Vale. The ultimate clash of philosophies, set to take place in April. 1. The internet, predictably, combusted. At Sky Sports, the Manchester Derby in the Champions League quarter-finals. Large red circle vs large blue circle, 4 incredible matchups, Chelsea vs Real Madrid, Villarreal vs Benfica, Manchester United vs Manchester City, Bayern Munich vs Liverpool. Who goes through to the semi-finals? Number U seal draw. At City_Chief, we got United. This is the perfect opportunity to humble them and end that ridiculous unbeaten streak. The 3-0 at the Etihad was a fluke. Pep will not make the same tactical mistakes twice. Come on City. Large blue circle 1. At Stretford Pad, City in the Champions League. It doesn't get any bigger than this. The city of Manchester is going to be a war zone for those 2 weeks. Let's show them who owns this town. Large red circle Japanese ogre. At Stephenhausen, people are panicking about drawing City, but to be the best, you have to beat the best. Marcus Vail out-tacticked Pep in the derby a few weeks ago. We have the mental edge. Bring it on. At Carrot 23, what a draw. Chelsea vs Real Madrid is a classic, but that Manchester derby is going to be sensational. Marcus Vail's unbeaten run is going to be put to the ultimate test. Pep will be obsessed with correcting what went wrong in the league derby. At AFC Gunner, United fans celebrating a new stadium and then immediately drawing Man City in the UCL is the elite level of football scriptwriting. City is going to dismantle that 4-4-2 diamond. Mim at Troll Football, image, Pep Guardiola staring intensely at a tactical whiteboard covered in complex equations, sweating profusely. Underneath, Marcus Vail playing with a red magnet, half asleep. At Fernandez SZN, Ronaldo loves playing against City in Europe. The script is already written. Another hat-trick at the Etihad is loading. At BBC Sport, a historic week for Manchester United. Thursday, submit plans for a new 100,000 seat stadium. Friday, draw Manchester City in the Champions League quarter-finals. Sunday, play Leicester City in the FA Cup quarter-finals. The Marcus Vail era is moving at breakneck speed. High voltage sign. At 1:30 p.m. on Friday, the media auditorium at Carrington was packed to capacity for the pre-match press conference ahead of Sunday's FA Cup quarter-final against Leicester City. The journalists, however, did not want to talk about Leicester. They wanted to talk about the stadium, and they desperately wanted to talk about Pep Guardiola. Marcus Vail walked into the room with his usual lazy, slouching gait. He had his hands in his pockets, and his sleepy eyes scanned the wall-to-wall crowd of reporters. He sat down, immediately pulling his red tactical magnet from his pocket and beginning to roll it smoothly across his knuckles, the quiet click-click-click acting as a rhythmic bass line in the room. The press officer cleared his throat. We will take questions regarding the stadium development first, then the Champions League draw, and finally the Leicester match. Immediately, a senior reporter from the Times was called upon. Marcus, the news regarding the planning application for the new stadium has sent the fans into raptures. How much involvement did you have in this master plan, and what does this mean for the long-term vision of the club under Axiom? Marcus shrugged his shoulders slightly, his fingers seamlessly spinning the magnet over his index finger. The long-term vision is what we discussed on day one, Marcus replied lazily. Manchester United must be elite in every department. You cannot be the biggest club in the world and have an infrastructure that belongs in the previous century. The owner's Axiom simply looked at the vacant land the club already owned and realized it was a waste of space. It is a logical decision. We built a modern house because the old one had too many leaks. My involvement was simply nodding as they told me what the owners will be doing. What more can I do regarding the stadium? Though I prefer a stadium where the pitch doesn't turn into a swimming pool during a Manchester winter. A ripple of chuckles went through the room. And the NOC? Are you confident the local council will approve it quickly? Why wouldn't they? Marcus asked innocently, his eyes half closed. We are not asking for public money. We are not taking away community green spaces. We are regenerating a massive part of the wharfside, creating thousands of jobs, and building a world-class venue at zero cost to the taxpayer. It is a win-win for everyone in Trafford. The administrative team has submitted everything according to the rules. We expect the NOC to be a formality. Another journalist stood up, shifting the focus. Marcus, the Champions League draw. Manchester City. The Manchester Derby in the quarter-finals of Europe. It is the draw everyone wanted to avoid, yet you have drawn them. How did you react when you saw the ball? Marcus stopped rolling the magnet for a fraction of a second, then resumed the rhythmic motion. He shrugged, looking entirely unbothered. I didn't react, Marcus said calmly. I was having my lunch. It doesn't matter. The room went completely quiet. The journalists leaned forward, laptops poised. It doesn't matter. The reporter pressed, incredulous. This is Manchester City. Pep Guardiola. Surely you would have preferred an easier draw, like Benfica or Villarreal. Marcus offered a sleepy, faint smile. If you want to go to a party and be a guest who is happy just to be invited, then yes, you pray for Benfica or Villarreal, Marcus explained, his tone conversational but laced with a cold, terrifying certainty. But we are not guests. We want to win the competition. If you want to be the champion of Europe, you have to beat the best teams at some point. Whether we meet Manchester City in the quarter-finals, the semi-finals, or the final in Paris, the challenge is the same. We have to play them. So, why worry about the timing? It is completely irrelevant. But Pep Guardiola will have analyzed your previous victory over them very carefully, a Spanish journalist pointed out. Do you think he has the tactical advantage now because he is seeking revenge? Marcus tilted his head, his eyes focusing on the reporter. Pep is a fantastic manager. He will analyze, he will adjust, and he will try to solve the problems we presented to him at the Etihad, Marcus said smoothly. But I also analyze. I also adjust. Football is not a static game. We will not play the same way we played in the derby. If he prepares for our past, he will have a very difficult time dealing with our present. He tapped the red magnet against the desk, a sharp, singular sound that cut through the room. We respect City. They are a brilliant team. But we do not fear them. We do not fear anyone. On Sunday, we play Leicester. That is our focus. Once the Champions League match arrives, we will handle it. We do not look at the mountain and panic, we just take the next step. 1. The press officer stepped in. Final questions on Leicester, please. After a few routine tactical questions about Brendan Rodgers' counter-attacking threat and the fitness of players, Marcus stood up. He slipped the red magnet back into his pocket, gave a polite, lazy nod to the room, and walked out, leaving behind a press corps that was absolutely mesmerized by his utter lack of fear. As Marcus's quotes hit the internet, the reaction from both United and rival fans solidified the narrative. Marcus Vale was a different breed of football manager. He wasn't playing the media game. He wasn't playing the underdog card. He was operating with the certainty of a man who had already simulated the entire future in his mind. At UTD Report, Marcus Vale on drawing Man City in the UCL, if you want to be the champion of Europe, you have to beat the best teams at some point. Why worry about the timing? It is completely irrelevant. We do not fear them. We do not fear anyone. Large red circle. At City_Chief, Vale is talking very big for someone who has only been in English football for 4 months. Pep is going to put him in his place in April. Let's see if his present can handle a motivated City side. Large blue circle number MCFC2. At Gold Bridge, if he prepares for our past, he will have a very difficult time dealing with our present. That is an elite quote. Vale basically just warned Pep that the 3-0 tactics are already obsolete. The psychological warfare has started, and Marcus is already 1-0 up. At Tactical_Times, what makes Marcus Vale so dangerous is his emotional detachment. Most managers play the us against the world card or downplay their chances against City. Vale just looks at it as a logical equation. We have to beat them eventually, so who cares? It's terrifying. Meme at Troll Football, image, a giant, towering monster labelled Manchester City looking down at a tiny knight labelled Manchester United. The knight has Marcus Vale's face, and he is casually tossing a red magnet while yawning. At Anfield Watch, if United actually beat City in Europe and start building that stadium, we are looking at a decade of dominance. Axiom's financial power, backed by a manager who literally doesn't experience fear, is a cheat code. At Bain Sports, we do not look at the mountain and panic, we just take the next step. Marcus Vale's philosophy is transforming Manchester United from a chaotic, emotional club into a disciplined, clinical machine. The FA Cup clash with Leicester on Sunday is the immediate hurdle. At Stretford Pad, 100K stadium plans submitted. Draw City in the UCL, and our manager shrugs and says, doesn't matter. The arrogance is back at Old Trafford, and it is beautiful. Let's destroy Leicester on Sunday and keep the treble dream alive. Large red circle trophy. Dash. The sprawling, minimalist smart villa was completely dark from the outside, its sharp architectural angles silhouetted against the wet, low-hanging clouds of the Cheshire sky. Deep beneath the house, however, a soft, bright white glow emanated from the subterranean garage. This was not just a parking space for high-end luxury vehicles, it was a state-of-the-art engineering laboratory, built to Marcus's exact, demanding specifications. The air was cool, smelling faintly of solder, fresh premium leather, and lithium-ion battery coolant. 2 large, industrial-grade hydraulic lifts occupied the center of the room. On one lift sat his immaculate, dark green 1994 Volvo 850 Estate. It was quiet, armored, and electric-swapped, a masterpiece of silent engineering. But recently, it had become a victim of its own perfection. The local paparazzi and car spotters had fully clocked it. Whenever the dark green wagon left the gates of Hale Barnes or approached the barriers at Carrington, a small crowd of cameras was already waiting in the bushes. The Volvo was no longer a ghost. It had become a beacon. So, Marcus had decided to build a decoy. He stood under the second hydraulic lift, wearing a pair of comfortable grey training sweatpants, a dark t-shirt, and thick mechanical gloves. On the lift above him was his new project, a pristine, deep anthracite grey 1991 Mercedes 300T Estate, W124. 2. To anyone on the streets of Manchester, a W124 Estate was a charming, slightly boxy vintage relic from the early 90s, the ultimate unassuming family wagon, often used by antique dealers or retro enthusiasts. It was completely low-key, blending seamlessly into the background of everyday traffic like a ghost. But what Marcus was doing to it was pure mechanical wizardry. He was retrofitting the classic German cruiser by hand. He had completely gutted the original, aging inline-6 engine and drivetrain, replacing them with a custom-engineered, dual-axial flux electric motor setup mounted directly to the rear subframe. To maintain the car's legendary, ultra-smooth ride quality, Marcus had meticulously rebuilt and reinforced the factory self-leveling hydraulic rear suspension, integrating it with a custom-programmed electronic dampening system. He reached up, using a specialized pneumatic torque wrench to tighten the high-voltage connections on the custom 90 kWh structural battery pack he had fabricated to fit perfectly flat beneath the rear cargo floor. The battery layout didn't compromise a single millimeter of the cavernous retro boot space. Clack 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 clack. The mechanical whir of the tool echoed satisfyingly in the silent, immaculate garage. Once finished with the undercarriage, Marcus lowered the lift, bringing the anthracite grey Mercedes down to the polished concrete floor. He opened the driver's door, stepping into the cabin. He had kept the interior completely vintage, pristine retro blue velour upholstery, beautiful polished zebrano wood trim on the dashboard, and the original 4-spoke steering wheel. He had even integrated a hidden, high-speed tactical display behind the analog instrument cluster, completely invisible unless activated by a biometric thumbprint sensor hidden under the gear selector. It was the ultimate luxury sleeper. Completely silent, heavily armored with lightweight composite plating beneath the vintage body panels, incredibly comfortable, and possessing an instantaneous, terrifying 600 horsepower that could launch the heavy wagon from 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds. Marcus sat in the plush driver's seat, resting his hands on the vintage steering wheel. A smile touched his lips. This was his new sanctuary. The Volvo 850 Estate would remain his daily driver for Carrington, a highly visible, highly publicized decoy for the paparazzi and the media to chase. But this Mercedes W124 would be his quiet escape, the car he would use to slip completely unnoticed through the rain-slicked streets of Manchester, blending into the city like a shadow. Above his head, a series of flat-screen monitors mounted to the garage wall flickered to life. One display showed the live telemetry of the Mercedes custom battery management system. Another showed a running playlist of tactical analysis videos, specifically, heat maps of Kevin De Bruyne's movement patterns and the structural spacing of Ruben Dias's defensive transitions under Pep Guardiola. He didn't need to sit in a dark study to analyze his opponents. His mind processed the data effortlessly while his hands worked on physical engineering, the rhythmic clink of tools and the spinning magnet keeping his focus perfectly balanced. The media thought he was arrogant. The pundits predicted his unbeaten run would end in the tactical meat grinder of the Champions League quarter-finals. They thought his team was a fragile, defensive illusion waiting to be shattered by the geniuses of Europe. 2. Marcus watched the red magnet spin on the dashboard, its smooth reflection catching the blue light of the tactical monitors. "They still think we are playing football," he whispered softly to the empty garage. 5. He caught the magnet as it finished its spin, clenching his fist tightly around it. The board was set. The blueprints were signed. The final pieces were moving. And none of them had any idea what the machine was truly capable of. Chapter 50, The Blueprint of Youth. The magic of the FA Cup, Marcus Vail had concluded long ago, was simply a statistical anomaly romanticized by the British press. When a lower league team defeated a giant, it wasn't magic, it was merely a failure of the superior team to properly manage the variables of effort, shape, and psychological complacency. On Sunday afternoon, against a dangerous Leicester City side managed by Brendan Rodgers, Marcus ensured no such anomaly occurred. The quarter-final tie ended in a routine, thoroughly professional 2-1 victory for Manchester United. Knowing the immense physical toll the Champions League had taken on his squad, Marcus had rotated his starting 11. Cristiano Ronaldo, Bruno Fernandes, Raphael Varane, Kieran Trippier, Harry Maguire, and Denis Zakaria were not even named on the bench. They were given the weekend off to rest their legs in the stands. Instead, Marcus deployed his B team utilizing the same suffocating 4-4-2 diamond structure. Edinson Cavani and Donny van de Beek provided the goals in a match where United commanded 65% possession, carefully neutralizing Leicester's rapid transitional threats. Leicester grabbed a late consolation goal from a corner, but the result was never truly in doubt. Manchester United were going to Wembley for the FA Cup semi-finals. By Sunday evening, the timeline was flooded with fans celebrating a domestic cup run, paired with the quiet realization that Marcus Vail had effortlessly navigated a quarter-final without using a single one of his world-class superstars. At UTD District, full-time, Manchester United 2-1 Leicester City. Goals from Cavani and Van de Beek send us to Wembley. The unbeaten run under Marcus Vail continues, and he did it with the entire first string resting. Large red circle trophy. At Gold Bridge, that is what you call elite squad management. We used to play Bruno into the ground in the FA Cup just to scrape a win. Vail leaves them in the stands, plays the second string, and still controls the game. Wembley, here we come. At Statman Dave, Manchester United restricted Leicester City to just 0.4 xg from open play today, despite resting their entire starting back line. The tactical system Marcus Vail has implemented is completely plug and play. The machine works no matter who wears the shirt. At the Man UTD way, semi-final draw is going to be spicy. Chelsea, Liverpool, and Man City all won their ties. Whoever we get, Wembley is going to be a war zone. Give me Chelsea. Let's show Tuchel what a real transition looks like. At CFC Daily, United getting to Wembley with their B team is actually annoying. They have way too much depth now that they aren't carrying deadwood. Praying we draw them so Reece James can finally humble that midfield. At Stretford Pad, FA Cup semi-final. UCL quarter-final against City. Third in the league. A 100,000 seat stadium on the way. If you told me this is where we would be back in October when they battered us at Watford, I would have sent you to an asylum. At AFC Gunner, the scary part isn't that United are winning, it's how bored Marcus Vail looks while doing it. The guy literally didn't even celebrate the second goal today. He just spun a magnet in his hand and sat back down. Psycho behavior. Loudly crying face too. Monday morning brought a massive exodus to Carrington. With the 2-week FIFA international break officially commencing, the training ground rapidly emptied. Over 80% of the first team packed their bags and boarded flights across the globe. Ronaldo, Bruno, and Dalot flew to Lisbon, Varane to Paris, Maguire and Sancho to St. George's Park 1. For the next 10 days, the sprawling, newly renovated state-of-the-art Axiom-funded complex was eerily quiet. Only a handful of senior players remained, those retiring from international duty, recovering from minor knocks, or simply not selected, such as Nemanja Matic, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, and Donny van de Beek. To a normal manager, the international break was a time to take a vacation, play golf, or catch up on administrative paperwork. To Marcus Vail, it was an opportunity to mine raw, unfiltered data. On Wednesday morning, a heavy mist rolled across the immaculate green pitches of Carrington. The Manchester United under-18 and under-23 academy squads had been summoned to the primary first-team pitch for a joint 11v11 training match alongside the remaining senior players. The young teenagers' highly touted prospects like Alejandro Garnacho, Kobbie Mainoo, Hannibal Mejbri, and Alvaro Fernandez stood on the grass, nervously adjusting their socks. Training with the first team was an honor, but doing it under the gaze of the undefeated, enigmatic Marcus Vail was terrifying. 2. But when Marcus walked out of the main building, he wasn't wearing a manager's coat. He wasn't carrying a tactical clipboard. He was wearing the official black Manchester United training kit, complete with boots and shin guards. He was casually tossing his circular red tactical magnet in the air, catching it with a soft slap against his palm. The academy kids stared in bewildered silence. Good morning, Marcus smiled jovially, walking right into the center of the youth players. He looked around, his sleepy eyes taking in their tense postures. Why does everyone look like they are about to face a firing squad? Relax. Football is a game. Today, we are just going to play. He tossed the magnet to one of the youth coaches on the touchline, who caught it with a surprised blink. I need some cardio, Marcus announced casually, stretching his hamstrings. So, I will be playing as the deep-lying playmaker for the yellow bibs. Matic, Donnie, Aaron, you are on the red team. The rest of you, split up evenly. And listen to me very carefully. Marcus pointed a finger at an 18-year-old Kabi Mainu, a wide, mischievous grin spreading across his face. If any of you go easy on me, I will demote you to the under-14s. Try to nutmeg me. I dare you. The tension shattered instantly. A wave of nervous laughter swept through the teenagers. The idea of their manager daring them to humiliate him on the pitch was so absurd that it immediately dissolved their anxiety. The whistle blew, and the training match began. To the naked eye, it was just a fun, high-intensity kickabout. Marcus was smiling, shouting encouragement, and applauding good touches. He seemed entirely relaxed, jogging through the center circle, rarely sprinting, playing the role of an older veteran enjoying a run out with the youth. But beneath the lazy smile and the casual jogging, Marcus's brain was operating at a terrifying cognitive frequency. He wasn't just playing, he was actively scanning, mapping, and dissecting the gameplay, habits, and psychological profiles of every single teenager on the pitch. He was using himself as a calibration tool, physically interacting with the youth system to measure their variables in real time. Marcus received a zipped pass from a young center back. Instantly, 3 red shirts swarmed him to press. Marcus didn't panic. With effortless, supernatural spatial awareness, he let the ball run across his body, took a single, velvet touch with his instep, and slipped a blind, no-look pass straight through the pressing triangle, hitting Alejandro Garnacho perfectly in stride on the left wing. 10 minutes later, Kabi Mainu playing for the opposition received the ball in a tight pocket of space. Marcus deliberately stepped out of his zone, pressing the teenager aggressively, closing down his passing angle to see if the boy would panic. Mainu didn't flinch. Instead of rushing a pass, the young midfielder dropped his shoulder, used a beautiful, fluid hip rotation to shield the ball from Marcus, and elegantly spun away, gliding past the manager before pinging a cross-field diagonal. Marcus stopped jogging, a genuine smile touching his lips. The match blurred on. Marcus was a ghost in the midfield. He wasn't the strongest, and he certainly wasn't the fastest, but he was always exactly where the ball was going to be 2 seconds before it arrived. He dictated the tempo with 1-touch and 2-touch passing, constantly communicating, forcing the academy players to adjust to a European, Champions League rhythm of thought. At one point, Hannibal Mejbri tried to take Marcus up on his pre-match dare, attempting a cheeky elastico to nutmeg the manager near the touchline. Marcus casually closed his legs, trapping the ball, and gave the young Tunisian a sleepy, amused look. Too slow, Hannibal, Marcus chuckled, tapping the ball away. Your hips telegraphed the movement. You have to deceive with your shoulders first. I'll get you next time, boss. Hannibal laughed, immediately sprinting back into position. When the session finally ended after 90 minutes of relentless football, the academy players collapsed onto the grass, panting and drinking water, their faces glowing with adrenaline and excitement. They had just played an entire match with their manager, and it had been the most enjoyable, intense session of their young careers. Marcus walked off the pitch, not even breathing heavily. He accepted a towel from a physio, wiping his face. He hadn't just gotten his cardio in. He had mentally downloaded the entire tactical potential of the Manchester United Academy. He knew exactly who had the psychological resilience for Old Trafford, who needed a loan. He walked over to the touchline, retrieved his red magnet from the youth coach, and slipped it into his pocket. Good session, Marcus said to the academy directors standing nearby. Keep Mainu with the first team training group when the seniors return. And tell Garnacho to practice receiving the ball on his right foot against a wall for an hour every day. Before the directors could even process the highly specific instructions, Marcus was already walking back toward the main building, casually tossing his magnet in the air. 4 days later, the international break reached its midpoint. Marcus had an obligation of his own, the Premier League's mandatory Spring Managers Summit in London. At 6 a.m. on a crisp, overcast Tuesday morning, Marcus stood in the expanse of his Hale Barnes garage. He walked toward his iconic, dark green 1994 Volvo 850 Estate. He opened the heavy driver's door and slid into the driver's seat. The engine purred to life with a familiar, mechanical hum. Marcus pulled the gear selector into drive, and the Volvo glided out of the underground garage, merging onto the quiet suburban roads. As he navigated toward the M6 motorway, heading south for the 4-hour drive to London, the Volvo devoured the miles in silence. Marcus wasn't dreading the summit. In fact, his sleepy eyes stared at the grey asphalt ahead with a faint spark of anticipation. Today, he wouldn't be looking at data on a screen. Today, he was going to walk into a room and observe Pep Guardiola, Jurgen Klopp, and Thomas Tuchel in the flesh. 4. The Premier League managers were preparing to discuss the rules of the game. Marcus Vale was driving to London to rewrite them. Chapter 51, The London Junction. The hum of the M6 motorway was a dull, rhythmic vibration through the chassis of the dark green Volvo 850 Estate. Outside, the English countryside rolled past in a blur of grey fields and damp, overcast skies. Inside the cabin, however, the atmosphere was an entirely different landscape. A high-speed torrent of auditory data filled the insulated interior. To any normal passenger, the sound coming through the car's speakers would have been a chaotic, deafening wall of noise, screaming whistles, frantic crowd roars, and high-pitched squeaks resembling a flock of manic birds. It was the audio feed of Manchester City's recent match against Sporting CP in the Champions League, playing at exactly 4 times the normal speed. To Marcus Vale, it was music. His cognitive processors took the chipmunk-like pitch of the commentators and the microsecond shifts in the crowd's tension, translating them back into a 3-dimensional tactical map. He could hear exactly when Pep Guardiola's defensive line stepped up, when Aymeric Laporte hesitated on a vertical pass, and when Rodri was forced to cover the half space. 2. Keeping his right hand steady on the steering wheel, Marcus reached down to the center console with his left, tapped the steering wheel controls to lower the volume slightly, and pressed his Bluetooth earpiece. He speed-dialed his younger sister, Elena. "Well, if it isn't the ghost of Manchester," Elena Sterling greeted him, her voice dripping with dry sarcasm. "To what do I owe this miraculous honor? Did your Volvo finally break down, or did you accidentally dial the wrong Sterling?" Marcus let out a soft, lazy chuckle, steering the Volvo smoothly into the fast lane to glide past a struggling lorry. "Now, is that any way to greet your favorite brother? I'll have you know this Volvo is structurally superior to anything currently on the road. And no, I did not dial the wrong number. I am actually driving down to London." "London? You? Leaving your fortress in Hale Barnes?" Elena asked, genuinely surprised. "Are you sure you didn't take a wrong turn?" "Very funny, Elle," Marcus smiled, his eyes half closed as he checked his mirrors. "There is a mandatory Premier League managers meeting tomorrow morning. Alexander Vance basically threatened to lock me out of Carrington if I didn't attend. Since I am already on the M6, I wanted to check if you are free. I haven't seen you since Christmas." "I am actually free. My afternoon lecture's just finished," Elena said warmly. "Where are we meeting? If you suggest a drive-through, I am hanging up." "I was thinking we meet at the Connaught in Mayfair," Marcus replied lazily, shifting gears. "It's quiet, high-end, and the staff actually know how to keep the paparazzi away." "The Connaught? Look at you. All right, I can be there in an hour. Don't fall asleep in the lobby, Marcus. I mean it. I make no promises. Drive safely, EL." The call clicked shut. Marcus tapped the steering wheel, returning the audio feed to its rapid, chaotic 4x speed. He pressed his foot down on the accelerator. The Volvo didn't roar, it simply surged forward with a smooth, silent, terrifying force, effortlessly bypassing the high-speed traffic. He remained strictly within the speed limit, yet his driving lines were perfect. 4 hours later, the towering, historic brick facade of the Connaught Hotel appeared through the London drizzle. Marcus pulled the vintage Volvo into the private, cobblestone driveway, parking directly behind a gleaming Aston Martin. A young hotel valet approached, his expression visibly bewildered. He was used to parking bespoke Rolls-Royces and flashy supercars, not 30-year-old Swedish family estates. But as the window rolled down, the valet immediately recognized the sleepy, slouching face of the undefeated Manchester United manager. Respect instantly replaced his confusion. "Good afternoon, Mr. Vale," the valet said politely, opening the door. "Good afternoon," Marcus replied with a lazy nod, stepping out and handing him the keys. Be gentle with the clutch. It bites a little early. The valet nodded, slipping into the driver's seat. The moment he closed the door, he froze. The interior was not what he expected. It was immaculate, but the dashboard had been entirely digitized with custom aerospace metrics, and the pedals were reinforced polished steel. It's just an old Volvo, the valet thought to himself. He pressed the heavy clutch down, shifted the manual gear stick into first, and, expecting the sluggish response of a heavy vintage car, stepped firmly on the accelerator while releasing the clutch. The response was instantaneous. Because Marcus had electric swapped the car, mating dual axial flux motors to a reinforced manual gearbox, the car possessed 1,000 pound-feet of instant torque. The heavy estate car leaped forward like a silent missile. The valet's eyes went wide with terror. His instincts instantly took over, and he slammed both feet onto the clutch and brake pedals. The reinforced carbon ceramic brakes bit hard, throwing the valet forward against the seatbelt as the car stopped just inches from a stone pillar. The valet sat there, his heart hammering against his ribs, a thick bead of cold sweat forming on his forehead. Trembling, he wiped his brow with his sleeve, put the car into first gear, and drove it to the underground parking lot at a crawling speed. 1. Inside the hotel lobby, Marcus had already found a secluded corner in the plush lounge. Slipping his hands into his pockets, he sat down in a deep velvet armchair, slouched comfortably, and let his head rest back against the cushion. Within 30 seconds, his eyes fluttered shut, his breathing steadying into a light, peaceful doze. 10 minutes later, Elena Sterling stepped out of her sleek Mercedes A-Class and walked into the lounge. She scanned the room, her eyes landing on the secluded corner. There he was. The tactical prodigy who had the footballing world in a chokehold, completely passed out. Elena smirked, walking over with silent, purposeful strides. She leaned down next to his ear. "Marcus!" she barked loudly. Marcus's eyes snapped open instantly. He stared at his laughing sister, his expression a mixture of mild irritation and sleepy confusion. "Are you insane?" Marcus muttered, rubbing his eyes. "What happened to basic sibling etiquette?" "Basic sibling etiquette dictates that I don't let my brother look like a homeless man sleeping in a five-star hotel," Elena laughed, sliding into the armchair opposite him. "You haven't changed at all. You still sleep like a cat." "It is called energy efficiency, Elena," Marcus grumbled, though a warm smile broke through his sleepy face. They ordered a selection of light bites and a pot of fresh jasmine tea for Elena. For the next hour, the sibling banter flowed effortlessly. They argued about Elena's demanding macroeconomics professor and Marcus's complete lack of a social life. "Are you staying at the townhouse tonight?" Elena asked as they finished their food. Marcus shook his head slowly. "No. I have a room booked at a hotel near the Premier League headquarters. I want to minimize my travel time tomorrow morning." "You really are a hermit," Elena sighed with mock disappointment. "Fine. But you're paying for this lunch." "Naturally," Marcus smiled, pulling out his black Axiom corporate card. They walked out of the hotel together. Elena gave him a tight, affectionate hug, waving goodbye as she stepped into her car. Marcus turned to the valet stand. A moment later, the dark green Volvo glided silently up the driveway. The same young valet stepped out of the driver's seat. He was no longer bewildered. He had a massive, adrenaline-fueled grin on his face. "Nice car, sir," the valet said, handing over the keys with a look of reverence. "And great pickup." Marcus caught the keys, offering a sleepy, modest smile. "Thanks. Built it myself." 1. Marcus slipped into the silent sleeper car and drove to his nearby hotel, passing the evening entirely unbothered by the storm awaiting him the next morning. The Premier League headquarters was a bastion of corporate football. On Wednesday morning, the modern building was surrounded by sports journalists and camera crews desperate to catch a glimpse of the 20 managers arriving for the mandatory spring summit. Marcus bypassed the media, taking the underground lift straight to the executive boardroom. As he walked in, the managers were already scattered around the large mahogany table. Thomas Tuchel was deep in conversation with David Moyes. Jurgen Klopp was sharing a joke with Patrick Vieira. And sitting quietly at the far corner, staring at a tablet with intense focus, was Pep Guardiola. Marcus didn't mingle. He walked slowly toward an empty chair near the back, his posture slouching, his eyes half closed. "Ah! The unbeaten prodigy has arrived!" Jurgen Klopp boomed, walking over with a massive smile. Marcus. My analysts are going crazy trying to understand your diamond midfield. A normal manager would have felt flattered. A tactical purist would have engaged in a deep conversation. Marcus Vale tilted his head and blinked. Diamond? Marcus asked lazily, scratching the back of his neck. Oh, no, Jurgen. It's not really a diamond. It's more of a squashed trapezoid. To be honest, I just tell the lads to run wherever the grass looks the greenest. They seem to like it. Klopp paused, his smile faltering for a fraction of a second as he tried to figure out if Marcus was joking. Then, assuming it was a display of eccentric American humor, Klopp burst into a loud laugh. Haha. The grass is greener. I like that. 1. Thomas Tuchel walked over, holding an espresso. He looked at Marcus with a sharp, analytical gaze. Marcus. A very disciplined transition block you used against Atletico. But tell me, how do you manage the physical load on Zakaria? In a single pivot, he has to cover an incredible amount of lateral ground. Marcus pulled his red magnet from his pocket, tossing it lightly in his hand. Dennis? Oh, he just really likes running, Thomas. The medical team actually has to ask him to stop sometimes. Very energetic boy. I think it's the Swiss mountain air. 1. Tuchel stared at him. It was a completely absurd answer. He opened his mouth to press for the actual tactical mechanics, but before he could, a quiet, intense voice broke in. And what about when the opponent plays with a back three and dual wing-backs? Pep Guardiola stepped forward, his eyes burning with restless, obsessive energy. The Champions League clash was looming, and Pep wanted to probe Marcus's mind. If they force your shuttling eights wide, the center is open. How do you solve that, Marcus? The other managers went quiet. Marcus rolled the red magnet over his knuckles, click click click, and gave Pep a lazy, blank stare. Wing-backs. Marcus murmured, sounding genuinely confused. Why would my eights go out there? The wing-backs are standing by the touchline. They are very far away from the goal, Pep. So we just ignore them. It is much less work for us. Pep's jaw tightened. You ignore them? You just let them have the ball in the final third. Yes, Marcus smiled cheerfully. Running out there makes the players tired. So we just stand in the middle and wait. If they want to cross it, Harry Maguire has a very large head. He usually heads it away. Pep Guardiola stared at Marcus in silence. It was the most reductive, simplistic, idiotic description of football he had ever heard. Yet, United were completely undefeated. Pep's brain went into overdrive, desperately trying to decode the hidden genius behind Marcus's ridiculous words, completely unaware that Marcus was deliberately feeding him nonsense to make him overthink. 4. I see, Pep said tightly, turning and walking back to his seat, a storm of paranoia brewing in his mind. 1. Marcus simply smiled, slipping his magnet back into his pocket as the officials called the meeting to order. The administrative summit dragged on for hours. They debated the permanent 5 substitutions rule, VAR offside tolerance, and the grueling Winter World Cup schedule. The room was filled with heated arguments. Klopp and Pep yelled about player welfare. Dyche and Moyes argued about financial disparities. The voices echoed loudly across the mahogany table. Sitting in the back row, Marcus Vale was completely asleep. His head was tilted back, his arms crossed over his chest, and a soft, rhythmic breath escaped his lips. He had determined within the first 20 minutes that the arguments were entirely emotional and irrelevant to his own team's success, so he had simply shut his brain down to conserve energy. Suddenly, Patrick Vieira, the Crystal Palace manager sitting next to him, gave him a sharp nudge in the ribs. Marcus startled, his eyes snapping open as his right hand instinctively twitched toward his pocket. He blinked rapidly, looking around the room. The entire boardroom was staring at him in dead silence. Richard Masters, the Premier League chief executive, was looking at him from the head of the table. Mr. Vale, Masters said, clearing his throat. We are voting on the permanent 5 substitutions rule. We would value Manchester United's opinion on the matter. Marcus rubbed his face, letting out a quiet yawn that he didn't bother to hide. He leaned forward to his microphone. 5 substitutions, Marcus murmured, his voice groggy but suddenly laced with terrifying, cold logic. If you give a manager 5 variables instead of 3, you allow a team to completely change its tactical shape 3 times in 90 minutes. It rewards flexibility. If you cannot manage that level of tactical complexity on the touchline, you probably shouldn't be in this room. We vote yes. He leaned back, clicked off his microphone, and closed his eyes again. The room stared at him. He had gone from a babbling idiot who ignored wingbacks to a cold, calculating supercomputer in the span of 5 seconds, and was now attempting to go back to sleep. Jurgen Klopp looked at Tuchel. Pep Guardiola stared intensely at his tablet. Marcus Vail was an enigma, and as the meeting finally adjourned, the managers left London with one collective realization: trying to predict what the manager of Manchester United was going to do was completely impossible. Chapter 52, PMPC Mun vs MCI. The international break finally relinquished its grip on English football, leaving in its wake a tired, disjointed Manchester United squad that had scattered across the globe. Players returned to Carrington in various stages of physical and mental exhaustion. Realizing that the grueling midweek Champions League quarter-final clash against Manchester City was looming like a shadow, Marcus Vail made the bold decision to rotate his starting 11 for the Saturday Premier League fixture against Leicester City at Old Trafford. The match itself was a sluggish, stop-start affair, played under a grey, drizzling Manchester sky that perfectly mirrored the tired legs on the pitch. Marcus rested almost all of his key international players, fielding a makeshift lineup consisting of squad players who had seen limited minutes over the break. Despite the lack of cohesion, Cristiano Ronaldo started the match, specifically tasked with providing a focal point for first 60 minutes. In typical, clinical fashion, Ronaldo found the breakthrough in the 42nd minute, nodding home an in-swinging cross from Alex Telles. True to his pre-match blueprint, Marcus substituted the Portuguese superstar precisely at the hour mark, replacing him with Edinson Cavani to keep his primary weapon fresh for the midweek battle. Leicester capitalised on United's subsequent loss of attacking outlet, grabbing an equaliser in the 74th minute through Kelechi Iheanacho. The match ended in a pragmatic 1-1 draw, a result that slightly slowed United's relentless league charge but ensured the vital members of the squad remained unscathed. The slight slip in the league, however, was immediately forgotten. The attention of the global sports media turned entirely toward Monday afternoon, where the mandatory UEFA pre-match press conference was held at the Carrington Press Room. The room was packed to the rafters. Journalists from The Athletic, Sky Sports, LA Keep, Marca, and ESPN sat shoulder to shoulder, their laptops open, cameras focused on the empty stage. Beside Marcus sat United captain Harry Maguire, looking sharp but prepared for the media storm. Marcus slouched lazily in his chair, wearing a simple black club tracksuit. His hands were buried inside his pockets, and his fingers rhythmically spun his red tactical magnet, the quiet click-click-click acting as a background hum before the first microphone was activated. The UEFA media officer nodded to the first reporter, a senior writer from the BBC, who leaned forward to break the tension. "Marcus, last time you faced City, you won 3-0 at the Etihad with a deep defensive block and devastating counters. Pep Guardiola said afterward your team was surgically efficient. Should we expect the same approach tomorrow?" Marcus stopped rolling the magnet for a brief second. "Maybe. Maybe not," he replied lazily, his voice carrying effortlessly over the microphones. "If I tell Pep the answer now, he saves himself 6 hours of tactical preparation tonight. I am not generous enough for that." A soft wave of laughter rippled through the room. Beside him, Maguire ducked his head slightly to hide a grin behind his hand. James Ducker of The Telegraph quickly followed up. "Do you think Pep underestimated you in the first match?" "No," Marcus answered instantly, without a hint of irony. "Pep Guardiola does not underestimate people. That is why he has won everything. Underestimating opponents is for people on football Twitter." 3. The focus shifted to the captain. Rob Dawson from ESPN aimed his recorder at the defender. "Harry, what was the biggest difference tactically in that 3-0 win?" Maguire leaned into his mic, his tone serious and analytical. "The distances between us. Everyone knew exactly where they had to be. We weren't chasing City individually. We moved together." 2. Marcus immediately tilted his head toward his microphone. "See? He speaks like a centre-back now. I am very proud." Small laughter rippled around the room again as Maguire rolled his eyes, adjusting his microphone with a helpless shake of his head. The questions came thick and fast, pivoting between tactical probes and attempts to generate headline-grabbing quotes. When Samuel Luckhurst asked for Marcus's response to critics labeling his derby victory as anti-football, the young manager didn't even blink. "If the scoreboard says 3-0, it sounds very pro-football to me," Marcus deadpanned. Do you enjoy these tactical battles with Guardiola? Melissa Reddy asked from the second row. Marcus offered a sleepy, faint smile. Very much. It feels like trying to rob a bank where the security guard is also trying to rob you. Even the hardened journalists laughed out loud at the analogy. It was the perfect encapsulation of the two masterminds trying to pick each other's locks simultaneously. When Miguel Delaney asked about the pride Marcus took in Pep praising his defensive structure, the room fell quiet to catch the response. A lot, Marcus said, the humor draining from his voice, replaced by cold conviction. Defensive organization is a sign that players trust each other. Lazy defending means fear. Structured defending means trust. The rapid clacking of keyboards filled the brief silence as dozens of reporters scrambled to transcribe the quote. Laurie Whitwell shifted the spotlight back to the United captain. Harry, City fans still mock you online before every big game. Does that motivate you? I don't really care about social media, Maguire answered smoothly, delivering the standard, media-trained response. Marcus leaned forward instantly. He is lying slightly. He checks his paparazzi pics to see if they got his good angle. The room erupted. Camera operators chuckled, and several reporters openly wheezed. Maguire blinked in shock, turning his head slowly to look at his manager with wide eyes. Boss, Maguire muttered, leaning into his mic, his face flushing a distinct shade of red. That is supposed to be confidential. You said you wouldn't tell anyone. Ah. Sorry, slip of the tongue, Marcus said smoothly, completely unfazed. Let me correct it. Harry is very professional. He doesn't get distracted by social media, and I want every one of my players to be like him. Marcus then glanced sideways at Maguire and gave him a cheerful, highly exaggerated thumbs up. 3. Maguire started laughing himself, shaking his head at the betrayal as the room roared. As the laughter subsided, the tone shifted back to the gravity of the occasion. When asked if this was the biggest match of his managerial career, Marcus simply replied, no. The next one always is. When questioned about the pressure of protecting his unbeaten record, he dismissed it effortlessly. The pressure is for you people. You need headlines if I lose. I sleep very well. He defended his recent squad rotation, quipping that he wasn't inspired by Pep Guardiola, but rather by the fact that human hamstrings are very persuasive teachers. The tactical dissection continued. When asked how difficult it was to defend against City's movement, Maguire admitted it was mentally exhausting because they dragged defenders everywhere. That is the point of positional play, Marcus added quietly. Pep wants defenders to feel like they are drowning slowly. Several reporters nodded, struck by the visceral accuracy of the description. The inquiries naturally turned to City's primary weapon. Marcus, what's the key to stopping Kevin De Bruyne? You pray a little first, Marcus said lazily. Then you reduce the spaces around him. Would you say he is the best midfielder in the world? Guillem Balaguer pressed. One of them. Very complete player. If football was an exam, he would ruin the grading curve for everyone else. Marcus similarly dismissed the idea that his counter-attacking style was the perfect antidote to Guardiola's football, noting that if a perfect antidote existed, people would stop losing to him. Ian Ladyman turned back to Maguire. Harry, has Marcus changed your game personally? Definitely, Maguire nodded. Positionally, especially. I think more before stepping out now. Yes, Marcus interjected smoothly. We are slowly reducing the number of heart attacks among Manchester United supporters. 1. Maguire lost his composure again, laughing directly into his microphone. The press conference moved into its final stages. Marcus emphasized the extreme importance of Denis Zakaria and Bruno Guimaraes, noting that big matches are decided by who controls panic better, and midfielders control panic. He scoffed at the idea that a second victory would silence his doubters, predicting that if United won, the media would simply say Pep was distracted by the weather. When asked if he thought Guardiola respected him more now, Marcus mused that he hoped so, because it would be awkward if one of the greatest managers in football history thought I was an idiot. Harry, has this been the happiest dressing room you've experienced at United? Daniel Taylor asked. It's definitely the calmest, Maguire replied honestly. Then, Jason Bird posed a question that brought the entire room to a standstill. Marcus, you once said your ideal team should be able to play every style. How close are you to that vision? Maybe 40%, Marcus answered. The journalists exchanged bewildered glances. Only 40. Bert clarified. Yes. Which is good news, Marcus said, his eyes narrowing slightly. It means we can become much more dangerous. He admitted he was a little surprised by how quickly the players had adapted to his methods, given that usually, humans resist change. Footballers resist it professionally. And he completely rejected the notion that Manchester United feared City, stating firmly that respect and fear are different things. Sensing an opening, Paul Hurst addressed the captain. Harry, what's Marcus like in the dressing room before big games? Maguire looked at the reporter, then slowly turned his head to look at Marcus. A small, mischievous glint appeared in the captain's eyes. Calm. Weirdly calm, Maguire began, his voice perfectly measured. Sometimes he is even sleeping in the dressing room. Marcus's hand froze on his magnet. He snapped his head toward Maguire, pointing a finger at him dramatically. Hey! That is confidential. Maguire raised his hands in mock innocence, turning back to the sea of grinning reporters with a perfectly straight face. Sorry, boss. Let me correct that. The boss is very focused and doesn't let anyone disturb him. He is in very deep thinking, and doesn't let anyone disturb him. The press room erupted in roaring laughter at the revenge. Maguire looked back at Marcus and gave him a cheeky, triumphant thumbs up. Marcus rolled his eyes, a soft, defeated chuckle escaping his lips as he clutched his forehead. The final questions wrapped up quickly. Marcus dodged a question about stealing a City player for his system with a simple nice try, and stated he would only believe something special was happening when there is silverware physically sitting inside the trophy cabinet. Finally, the UEFA media officer signaled for the last question. Tomorrow night, statement opportunity or just another game? Marcus paused. The room went completely silent. He slowly rolled the red magnet over his knuckles, the rhythmic click echoing clearly in the quiet. He looked up, his sleepy expression suddenly hardening into something intensely focused, losing all traces of his previous joviality. If you wear the Manchester United badge, every match should feel like a statement. 2. The weight of the quote lingered heavily in the air, leaving the journalists scrambling to type the final words. Marcus stood up lazily, buttoned his heavy black coat, and gave a brief, polite nod toward the reporters. Thank you, gentlemen. Please try not to invent too many quotes after I leave. The room erupted in laughter once more as the two stood up. Bruno Fernandes, who was waiting near the exit corridor to begin his tactical walk, shook his head with a wide grin. He says this every press conference now, Bruno announced to the room. Marcus laughed softly under his breath, walking out of the media room side by side with Maguire, leaving behind a buzzing, electrified media corps that knew they had just witnessed absolute gold. The battle lines for the Champions League Manchester Derby were drawn, and Manchester United was walking into it with absolute, unshakable calm. Trending, number UCL Derby, Marcus Vale, paparazzi angle, empty hod, bald fraud, KDB. At United stand Mufk, that press conference was peak comedy. He checks his paparazzi pics to see if they got his good angle. I am howling. Marcus and Harry are like a sitcom duo. Loudly crying face with tears of joy number MUFC. At City Chief, United fans laughing at press conference jokes while they literally just dropped points to Leicester at home. City are going to destroy you on Wednesday. Keep laughing. At Mark Goldbridge, we rotated the entire squad. Ronaldo got his goal and was subbed at 60 to stay fresh, and we got a point. Yes, a win would be better, but the target is the UCL. Vale's presser was elite. At Scouse Sam _LFC, both Manchester teams dropping points or sweating while Liverpool sit comfortably at the top of the league. Love to see it. Large red circle trophy. At Tactical _Times, defensive organization is a sign that players trust each other. Lazy defending means fear. Marcus Vale's ability to simplify complex football psychology is brilliant. At City _N99, robbing a bank where the security guard is also trying to rob you. Vale thinks he's a philosopher. Pep is going to run tactical rings around his midfield on Wednesday. 1. At UTD Trey, if football was an exam, De Bruyne would ruin the grading curve. Even Marcus knows KDB is him. But guess what? Dennis Zakaria is the invigilator. Number MUFC. At Simeon Ebener, United got lucky against us. City won't miss those chances. 1-1 to Leicester is their real level. At Maguire Fan Club, Harry getting his revenge on Marcus. He is sleeping in the dressing room. The cheek. The chemistry in this squad is beautiful under Vale. Loudly crying face heavy black heart. At AFC Gunnar, bro, Vale literally admitted he sleeps in the dressing room before games. Is this your tactical genius? Skull. At Fernandez SZN, replying to at AFC Gunnar, he sleeps because he's already simulated 10 million outcomes in his head and knows exactly how we win. Let the man rest. At City_Zen99, replying to at Fernandez SZN, keep coping. Pep has been cooking a new system for 3 weeks. Your low block is getting unlocked. At Mark Goldbridge, if you wear the Manchester United badge, every match should feel like a statement. Chills. Absolute chills. What a leader. At Real Madrid_fan, honestly, I need a Marcus Vale press conference every week. The guy is box office. No PR training, just pure vibes and tactical arrogance. At Salah_SZN, Ronaldo with 23 goals in the league now. It's actually annoying how much Vale has unlocked him by just letting him stand in the box. At Stretford Pad, replying to at Salah_SZN, it's called optimization mate. Why make a 37-year-old sprint when you have Sancho, Bruno and Dybala doing the legwork? It's simple math. At Chelsea_pride, United drew with Leicester's B team. If they play like that on Wednesday, Pep will score 5. At UTD District, replying to at Chelsea_pride, we played our own B team, you donut. Bruno, Trippier, Zakaria and Varane didn't even play. Read a book. 1. At City_Bill, can't wait to see Maguire try to find his good angle while our attackers are breezing past him. Loudly crying face. At Redival_retro, replying to at City_Bill, Maguire pocketed your entire team at the Etihad 3 weeks ago. Did you forget the 3-0? Or does your memory also work like a goldfish? At Anfield Talk, human hamstrings are very persuasive teachers. Honestly, can't even hate Vale. The way he answers these dumb journalist questions is top tier. At Simeon Ebener, the team that controls panic controls the match. He is 100% right about that. Atletico panicked in the second leg. City will too if United score early. At City Chief, replying to at Simeon Ebener, we don't panic. We are reigning champions. United are just having a purple patch. Wednesday will be a reality check. At UTD Trey, replying to at City Chief, reality check? We've beaten City, Chelsea, Arsenal and Atletico since November without losing once. When does the honeymoon end? When we lift the UCL trophy. At Tactical_Times, the psychological dynamic of Wednesday is massive. Pep is famously prone to overthinking Champions League matches. Marcus Vale telling the press maybe we deep block, maybe we don't is calculated to feed Pep's paranoia. At Pep_Stan, Pep isn't overthinking anything. He is the greatest of all time. Vale has played 20 games in England, sit down. At UTD_Analytics, Ronaldo scoring at 42 minutes and immediately subbed at 60. Vale is keeping the king on a strict pitch time budget. 9 goals in UCL already. He's hungry. At City_Zen99, replying to at UTD_Analytics, Etihad will be loud on Wednesday. We are going to bounce back hard. At Anfield Talk, the salt in this thread is magnificent. Manchester Derby in Europe is going to be toxic and I am absolutely here for it with my popcorn. At Fabrizio Romano, Manchester Derby in the UCL is the most anticipated match of the season. Tickets sold out in seconds. The tactical battle between Pep and Vale is officially active. Large red circle, large blue circle, number UCL. Premier League standings, as of Chapter 52. Liverpool, 69 points. Manchester City, 67 points. Manchester United, 60 points, unbeaten run preserved. Chelsea, 56 points. Premier League Golden Boot race. Cristiano Ronaldo, Manchester United 23 goals. Mohamed Salah, Liverpool 21 goals. Diogo Jota, Liverpool 13 goals. Note, Cristiano Ronaldo has also scored 9 goals in the Champions League campaign so far, bringing his season tally under Marcus Vale to historic heights. Chapter 53, MUN vs MCI First Leg, 1. Marcus Vale Pick 11. The air around Old Trafford crackled with an electric, suffocating tension. It was a Tuesday night in April. The floodlights cut through the damp Manchester mist, illuminating the sacred green pitch. Outside, the streets were a chaotic sea of red and sky blue flares. Inside, 75,000 fans generated a wall of noise so dense it vibrated the concrete foundations of the Stretford End. This was not just a Manchester derby. This was the quarter-final of the UEFA Champions League. High in the broadcasting gantry, Peter Drury and Jim Beglin looked down at the warming-up squads, their voices competing with the deafening roar of the stadium. A city divided, a continent watching, Drury began, his poetic cadence setting the global stage. Welcome to the Theatre of Dreams, where tonight, the local squabble transforms into a European crusade. Pep Guardiola arrives carrying the scars of a 3-0 humbling just weeks ago, desperate to prove that his philosophy cannot be permanently broken by a 27-year-old prodigy. But waiting for him is Marcus Vale, undefeated, unbothered, and unpredictable. 1. The footballing world has been holding its breath for this one, Peter, Beglin added, looking at the team sheets in his hand. Guardiola is a manager who notoriously overthinks big Champions League matches. Marcus Vale practically baited him into doing it during yesterday's press conference. And looking at this Manchester United lineup, Vale has thrown a curveball. The graphics flashed across the millions of screens worldwide. We all expected the narrow 4-4-2 diamond that United used to dismantle City at the Etihad, Drury noted. But Marcus Vale has completely ripped up that script. David De Gea in goal. Kieran Trippier, Raphael Varane and Harry Maguire retain their places in the back line. But at left back, Alex Telles is dropped. Aaron Wan-Bissaka starts on the left side of the defence. On paper, Wan-Bissaka is listed at left back, Beglin analysed quickly, his eyes darting across the tactical sheet. In reality, he won't be playing there at all. Moving into the midfield, Dennis Zakaria anchors alongside the towering physical presence of Scott McTominay, with Bruno Fernandes operating ahead of them. Out wide, Jadon Sancho starts. But the other massive change is up front. Marcus Rashford drops to the bench. Paulo Dybala starts alongside Cristiano Ronaldo. It's a trap, Peter, Beglin continued, his voice rising with excitement. Pep Guardiola has spent the last 2 weeks obsessing over how to beat the 4-4-2 diamond and how to stop Rashford's pace in behind. Vale knows this. So, he removes the diamond and removes the pace. He is forcing Guardiola to solve a completely new problem on the fly. For Manchester City, Drury announced, Guardiola deploys his trusted 4-3-3. Ederson in goal. Walker, Dias, Laporte and Cancelo in defence. Rodri, Bernardo Silva and the brilliant Kevin De Bruyne in midfield. Riyad Mahrez, Phil Foden and Raheem Sterling lead the line. The teams are in the tunnel. The battle of minds is about to begin. Down in the concrete tunnel, the atmosphere was thick enough to cut with a knife. The two squads stood side by side. The City players looked incredibly tense, their eyes locked forward. On the other side, the United squad mirrored the demeanour of their manager. They were eerily calm. The iconic Champions League anthem began to echo from the pitch. The managers walked out first. Pep Guardiola emerged into the deafening noise dressed in a dark grey suit, his face already edged with intense, nervous energy. He immediately walked to the edge of his technical area, crouching down slightly to inspect the wetness of the grass. Marcus Vale followed a moment later. He wore his heavy black club coat, his hands buried deep in his pockets. He walked with his signature, lazy slouch, letting out a quiet yawn as he approached the home dugout. He sat down in his heated Recaro seat, crossed his legs, and pulled his circular red tactical magnet from his pocket. Click click click. The referee blew the whistle. The roar from the Stretford End was deafening. Manchester City took the kickoff, and the chess match instantly began. Guardiola had prepared a highly specific built-up structure to bypass the United diamond. As soon as Ederson received the ball, Kyle Walker and João Cancelo inverted aggressively into the centre of the pitch to outnumber the midfield. But there was no diamond. As City transitioned into their pre-planned shape, they were suddenly met by an asymmetrical, aggressively physical defensive block. Jadon Sancho stayed wide on the right, completely pinning Cancelo back. But the most shocking tactical adjustment was occurring on the left side of the United defence. In the 4th minute, Rodri looked up and tried to play a vertical pass into the feet of Kevin De Bruyne, who had drifted into his favourite pocket of space on the right half space. Before the ball even reached the Belgian maestro, a shadow detached itself from the United back line. Aaron Wan-Bissaka stepped forward with terrifying speed, completely ignoring the defensive offside line, and intercepted the pass cleanly. Old Trafford roared its approval, sensing the aggression. Wan-Bissaka did not retreat to the left-back position. When De Bruyne jogged backward to reset, Wan-Bissaka followed him. When De Bruyne drifted out toward the right touchline, Wan-Bissaka followed him. "Good heavens," Martin Tyler exclaimed on the international feed. Marcus Vail has essentially deployed Wan-Bissaka as a roaming defensive marker. His sole responsibility tonight is to suffocate Kevin De Bruyne. "And look what happens when United win the ball back, Peter," Beglin pointed out eagerly. Wan-Bissaka tucks inside to become a third centre-back alongside Varane and Maguire. That allows Kieran Trippier to bomb completely up the right flank. It's a brilliantly deceptive, asymmetrical shape. Guardiola threw his arms up in the air, shouting at Bernardo Silva to drop deeper. But the United midfield was built to destroy. Marcus had not just selected two big men, he had assigned them entirely different jobs. Denis Zakaria was the transition destroyer, using his massive stride to shatter City's forward momentum before it could begin. Scott McTominay was the structural shield, shifting laterally to physically block the passing lanes into the half spaces. Every time City tried to force the ball into the centre, they were met by a heavy shoulder barge or a sweeping leg. The Stretford end recognized the grit, roaring with deafening approval after every crunching tackle, singing sarcastic chants down toward the frantic Guardiola. But Guardiola's City were monsters. They didn't just pass, they hunted. In the 12th minute, United recovered possession deep in their own half. Instantly, sky blue shirts collapsed inward violently. Guardiola's famous 5-second counter-press activated, attempting to suffocate United before they could breathe. Zakaria used his physical mass to hold off Rodri, poking the ball to Bruno Fernandes. Bruno didn't hold it, he played a brilliant, one-touch layoff into the feet of Paulo Dybala. The Argentine dropped deep, received the ball on the half-turn, and elegantly skipped past Laporte's aggressive press, opening up the entire pitch and shattering City's trap. Despite United's resilience, City's technical quality eventually carved an opening. In the 14th minute, a raking diagonal pass from Ruben Dias found Riyad Mahrez isolated on the right wing. Mahrez brought the ball down with a velvet touch, feinted inside onto his lethal left foot, and unleashed a vicious, curling shot aimed directly at the top far corner. David De Gea launched himself into the damp air. Extending his entire body, the Spanish goalkeeper managed to get the strongest of fingertips to the ball, pushing it onto the crossbar. It bounced down violently onto the goal line before Rafael Varane hooked it clear into the stands. "What a save!" Drury roared. David De Gea, magnificent. Down in the technical area, Pep Guardiola spun around, grabbing his bald head in disbelief. Marcus Vail, sitting 20 yards away, barely reacted. De Gea had been positioned correctly. From that angle, with that trajectory, the percentages still favored the goalkeeper. It was a spectacular save, but it was the expected outcome. He just kept rolling the red magnet over his knuckles. Click click click. United did not panic. They absorbed the pressure, their shape compressing and expanding like a lung. And in the 22nd minute, they struck back. With De Bruyne suffocated by Wan-Bissaka, City committed bodies forward. Zakaria won a thunderous tackle against Phil Foden. The ball spilled to Bruno Fernandes, who played a sharp, zipped pass into the feet of Paulo Dybala. Dias and Laporte were prepared to run backward. They had spent all week preparing for Marcus Rashford's terrifying vertical pace. Instead, Dybala's trickery was dragging them forward, into the technical spaces between the midfield and defense that they hated defending. Dybala drove at the retreating City back line. Cristiano Ronaldo made a devastating, diagonal run across the face of Ruben Dias, dragging the Portuguese centre-back entirely out of the central channel. Jadon Sancho suddenly cut inside, sprinting blindly into the void. Dybala slipped a gorgeous, weighted through ball perfectly into Sancho's path. Sancho took one touch and fired a fierce, low shot toward the bottom left corner. Ederson threw out his left boot. The ball clipped the goalkeeper's studs, agonizingly diverting its path just inches wide of the post, rippling the side netting. "Oh, breathtaking football from United!" Beglin shouted. Guardiola prepared for a track meet, but Marcus Vail has brought a scalpel. Dybala's technical ability in the pocket is completely pulling Laporte and Dias out of their comfort zones. The chess match had fully ignited. Pep Guardiola, however, was a genius in his own right. He wasn't going to stand by helplessly. Around the 30-minute mark, Guardiola finally found a pocket of oxygen. He frantically signaled for a shift. Bernardo Silva stopped trying to push high. Instead, he dropped deep, right beside Rodri. This movement suddenly created a temporary 4v3 midfield box for City. By outnumbering Zakaria, McTominay, and Fernandes, City suddenly regained control of the tempo. They began stringing together 30, 40 passes, forcing United backward. Guardiola stood on the touchline, a fierce glimmer of hope in his eyes. He had solved the puzzle. Marcus Vale stopped rolling his magnet. He leaned forward slightly, his sleepy eyes tracking the new passing network. He saw the box. He calculated the numerical disadvantage. Marcus stood up, walked to the edge of the technical area, and let out a sharp whistle. He pointed at Bruno Fernandes, then pointed directly at Bernardo Silva, and made a crushing, inward motion with his hands. Fernandes nodded instantly. Instead of staying high as a number 10, Bruno dropped 10 yards deeper, latching himself permanently onto Bernardo Silva. McTominay stepped up slightly to engage Rodri. Within 60 seconds, Guardiola's carefully constructed midfield box was entirely dismantled by Marcus's rapid man-to-man adjustment. The oxygen was immediately cut off again. Guardiola dropped into a deep squat on the touchline, rubbing his face furiously. Every time he picked the lock, Marcus Vale simply changed the keyhole. As the first half entered its final 10 minutes, the physicality of the match skyrocketed. The referee ignored several heavy challenges, allowing the game to flow. Old Trafford was a cauldron of noise, loving every second of the gritty, pragmatic warfare their team was waging against the slick City machine. In the 42nd minute, João Cancelo caught Sancho late with his studs, giving away a free kick deep in United's half. Trippier stood over the ball. Recognizing City's high line, he launched a massive, arcing ball perfectly over the head of Kyle Walker. Cristiano Ronaldo didn't try to beat Walker in a pure foot race. The 37-year-old knew Walker possessed the fastest recovery pace in the world. Instead, Ronaldo anticipated the flight of the ball a split second earlier than Walker. His elite reading of the game granted him the crucial yard before he exploded toward the dropping ball just inside the penalty area. The angle was tight. Ederson rushed out. Ronaldo hit a spectacular, first-time half-volley with his left foot. The shot beat Ederson, but it violently smashed against the underside of the crossbar, bouncing straight down onto the goal line and spinning away from danger. Old Trafford screamed in agony. Inches away. Drury cried out. The finest of margins. Cristiano Ronaldo, defying time and physics, so incredibly close to blowing the roof off this stadium. Ronaldo threw his head back, staring at the Manchester sky in disbelief. The referee soon raised his whistle to his lips. Peep. 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 And there is the whistle for halftime, Drury announced. It is goalless on the scoreboard, but do not let that fool you. This has been a tactical masterpiece of the highest order. It is 0-0, but it feels like we have watched a 6-goal thriller. Guardiola looks exhausted, Beglin noted, watching the Catalan manager march down the tunnel. He prepared for a 4-4-2 diamond and Marcus Rashford's pace. Instead, Marcus Vale gave him an asymmetrical 4-3-3, Paulo Dybala's trickery, and a man-marking masterclass. Even when Pep found a solution, Vale shut it down seconds later. Down in the technical area, Marcus Vale slowly stood up. He didn't rush toward the tunnel. He calmly slipped his red magnet back into his right pocket, buried his hands deep inside his heavy black coat, and offered a sleepy, satisfied stretch. The trap was working perfectly. Marcus walked lazily toward the dressing room to deliver his halftime instructions. The score was 0-0. But emotionally, Manchester United were already leading. At UTD District, 0-0 at the break, but what an unbelievable half of football. Marcus Vale benching Rashford for Dybala is a masterclass. Pep's centre-backs have no idea who they are supposed to be marking. Large red circle. At City_Chief, we hold the ball but we can't do anything with it. AWB is following De Bruyne like a desperate ex-girlfriend. Pep needs to change the system completely at halftime. This isn't working. Large blue circle. At Tactical_Times, Wan-Bissaka as an asymmetrical man marker on KDB is straight out of the 2004 Mourinho playbook, and it's completely short-circuiting Guardiola's entire possession structure. Vale is playing 5D chess right now. At Mark Holdbridge, that save from David De Gea. Unbelievable. And then Ronaldo hits the underside of the bar. It's 0-0 but my heart rate is at 180 BPM. We are actually going toe-to-toe with City in Europe. At Fabrizio Romano, the tactical duel between Guardiola and Vale is breathtaking. Guardiola adjusted the midfield box to free up Bernardo. Vale countered it within 60 seconds by dropping Bruno deep. Elite-level football. At Blue Moon Rising, De Bruyne hasn't been able to turn once. Rodri is getting bullied by Zakaria and McTominay. We look terrified of their transitions. Pep is overthinking it again. Why do we always do this in the UCL? Mim at Troll Football, image, a picture of Aaron Wan-Bissaka emptying his pockets. Out comes his phone, his wallet, his keys, and Kevin De Bruyne. 2. At Stretford Pad, the sheer disrespect of Marcus Vale. Pep is squatting on the touchline sweating bullets, and Vale is just casually spinning a magnet in his hand looking like he wants to go to sleep. I love my manager. Loudly crying face Japanese ogre. At CFC Daily, not gonna lie, this United team is terrifying. They don't panic when they lose the ball. They just shift their shape and choke you out. Very jealous of this structure right now. At AFC Gunner, Pep prepared for a track meet against Rashford, and Vale hit him with prime Dybala turning in the pocket. If Sancho finishes that chance, Old Trafford literally collapses from the noise. At UTD Faithful, Scott McTominay flattening Bernardo Silva was the highlight of the half for me. The physicality in our midfield is something we haven't had since Roy Keane. At Statman Dave, Cristiano Ronaldo's movement to beat Kyle Walker to that ball was purely intellectual. He knew he couldn't outsprint him, so he anticipated the drop a full second earlier. So unlucky to hit the crossbar. At City's N12, Mahrez was robbed. Best chance of the half, but De Gea turns into prime Yashin every time he plays us. We need to get Foden more involved centrally in the second half. At the Man UTD way, I can't stop laughing at Pep dropping into a squat and rubbing his bald head when Vale completely ruined his midfield box adjustment. The tactical battle is actually better than the football itself. At Rio 35, proper Champions League tie this. AWB is putting on an absolute clinic on De Bruyne. Don't change a single thing in the second half, boys. Keep it tight and hit them on the break. Large red circle flexed biceps. At Espnfk, he prepared for a track meet, but Marcus Vale brought a scalpel. Manchester United and City are locked at 0-0, but the tactical warfare is immense. Who breaks first? At United Stand Mufk, that half felt like 5 minutes. My stomach is in knots. If Ronaldo's shot goes 1 inch lower, the tie blows wide open. Come on United, we can actually win this. At Pep Tactics, Vale's defensive shape is incredibly elastic. Wan-Bissaka tucks in as a third CB in possession, which frees Trippier. It's forcing Cancelo into awful decisions. Pep has 15 minutes to figure out a counter move. At Markogden_, there is no fear in this Manchester United team anymore. They just absorb City's famous counter press and play right through it. Dybala has been a revelation between the lines. At UTD Trey, I am so confident I might just go to sleep. Marcus Vale has Guardiola on strings. We are getting that Champions League semi-final. Believe. Trophy Large Red Circle 3. Chapter 54, MUN vs MCI First Leg, 2. Inside the home dressing room at Old Trafford, the atmosphere was a picture of intense, breathless focus. The players took their seats, gulping down water and wiping the sweat from their faces. The first 45 minutes had been a grueling, relentless exercise in absolute discipline. Marcus Vale did not immediately speak. He stood by the tactical whiteboard, his eyes half closed, rapidly running through millions of simulated variables in his mind. He knew exactly what Pep Guardiola was saying in the away dressing room at that very moment. Guardiola was a manager built on control. The Catalan would not accept Aaron Wan-Bissaka neutralizing his primary playmaker. Pep would attempt to weaponize the man marking. Marcus turned to face his squad, pulling his hands from his pockets. "Excellent work," Marcus said, his voice quiet but carrying effortlessly across the room. "You have completely derailed their passing rhythms. But the second half will be different. Pep is going to try and break our defensive block by using Kevin De Bruyne as bait." Marcus looked directly at his right back, who had just spent 45 minutes operating as a specialized shadow on the left side of the pitch. "Aaron, listen to me very carefully," Marcus instructed, picking up a whiteboard marker. "In the second half, Pep will tell De Bruyne to drift as far wide to the touchline as possible, or to drop all the way back next to Rodri. He wants you to follow him. He wants you to abandon the defensive line completely so that a massive channel opens up for Raheem Sterling or João Cancelo to exploit." Wan-Bissaka nodded, his face locked in utter concentration. "Do I stay with him, boss?" "No, Marcus answered instantly. We do not get dragged out of our shape. If De Bruyne moves into our half of the pitch, you stay locked onto him. But the second he steps backward across the halfway line into his own half, or drifts to the extreme touch line, you drop the assignment. You immediately pass him off to Jadon or Scott, and you tuck right back in beside Raphael as a centre-back. Do not let them open that channel. Marcus turned to address the rest of the room. They are going to commit more bodies forward. They are going to take risks because they feel they need an away goal to take back to the Etihad. Let them push up. Do not panic if they sustain pressure. If we can strike on the transition, we take it. But we do not chase a wild victory tonight at the expense of our structure. We are playing a 180-minute match. Discipline is more important than desperation. We stay compact, we absorb, and when they overcommit, we punish them. Marcus slipped the marker back onto the tray and offered his players a lazy, reassuring smile. Let them exhaust themselves. Let's go. As the players filed out of the tunnel for the second half, the rain had intensified, slicking the Old Trafford pitch into a lightning-fast surface. High up in the gantry, Peter Drury adjusted his headset as the camera panned across the stadium. The players emerged from the tunnel, the Manchester rain now slicing through the floodlights, Drury announced, his voice setting the cinematic stage. 45 minutes down, a lifetime of tension remaining. 0-0 on the scoreboard, but the tactical warfare has been absolutely breathtaking. Guardiola has to find an answer to Wan-Bissaka, Peter, Jim Beglin analysed beside him. City cannot afford to have Kevin De Bruyne erased from the game for another entire half. I expect to see some heavy rotational movement on that right flank to try and pull the United defence apart. The referee blew his whistle, and Manchester United took the kickoff. Immediately, Guardiola's half-time adjustments materialised exactly as Marcus had predicted. Kevin De Bruyne, rather than operating in the dangerous right half space, dropped incredibly deep, essentially standing shoulder to shoulder with Rodri in the centre circle. Guardiola stood on the touchline, watching intently, expecting Wan-Bissaka to follow the Belgian out of the defensive third, thereby creating a massive gap in United's back line. Wan-Bissaka took 2 steps forward, recognised the trigger his manager had just warned him about, and stopped dead in his tracks. He pointed at De Bruyne, shouted a quick instruction to Jadon Sancho to close the passing lane, and immediately backpedaled, tucking firmly into a flat back 4 alongside Varane and Maguire. Guardiola had frustration written all over his face. The bait had been completely ignored. The United defensive block remained a solid, impenetrable wall. However, Manchester City's quality was undeniable. Realising the man-marking trap had been adjusted, City shifted their focus to the right flank. They began to aggressively overload the wide areas, using Riyad Mahrez, Kyle Walker and Bernardo Silva to create rapid, 3-versus-2 passing triangles against Aaron Wan-Bissaka and Paulo Dybala, who was tracking back diligently to assist. In the 54th minute, the relentless pressure finally cracked the red wall. Walker overlapped fiercely, dragging Wan-Bissaka wide toward the touchline. Mahrez collected the ball, darting inside onto his favoured left foot into the space Wan-Bissaka had just vacated. Instead of shooting, Mahrez slipped a brilliant, disguised reverse pass into the penalty area for Bernardo Silva, who had made a blindside run past Dennis Zakaria. Bernardo reached the byline and immediately cut the ball back across the face of the 6-yard box. Harry Maguire threw himself at the cross, but the wet ball schemed agonizingly off his shin pad. It fell perfectly into the path of Kevin De Bruyne, who had ghosted late into the box from his deep midfield position. De Bruyne didn't hesitate. He struck a first-time, side-footed shot that arrowed perfectly through the crowded penalty area and nestled into the bottom corner, leaving David De Gea rooted to the spot. Kevin De Bruyne. Drury's voice exploded through the broadcast. A bolt of sky-blue lightning in the theatre of dreams. The maestro ghosts into the penalty area, and Manchester City draw first blood in the derby. It's all in the build-up, Peter, Beglin highlighted as the replays rolled. Mahrez and Walker finally managed to isolate Wan-Bissaka and drag him out of the central channel. Bernardo makes the penetrating run, and De Bruyne's late arrival from deep is impossible to track. A beautifully engineered goal by Pep Guardiola. Manchester United 0-1 Manchester City. The away end erupted in a frenzy of sky-blue scarves. Guardiola pumped his fists wildly on the touchline, screaming in relief and pointing at his coaching staff. The stadium fell into a tense, nervous hush. Going a goal down to Manchester City usually meant a slow, suffocating death by possession. Sitting in the dugout, Marcus Vail didn't flinch. His expression remained entirely sleepy. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his red magnet, and began to roll it over his knuckles. Click click click. This was the exact scenario he had simulated. City had scored. They felt superior. 3. Marcus stood up and walked to the edge of his technical area. He signaled to his bench. In the 61st minute, Marcus made his first major move in the tactical chess match, utilizing a double substitution. Paulo Dybala, who had brilliantly manipulated the spaces in the first half but was now tiring against City's overloads, was withdrawn. Jadon Sancho, exhausted from his defensive tracking, also made way. On came Donny van de Beek, and, to a massive, roaring ovation from the Stretford end, Marcus Rashford sprinted onto the pitch. A significant shift from Marcus Vale, Drury noted. He sacrifices the technical trickery of Dybala for the raw, terrifying pace of Marcus Rashford. And Van de Beek slots into the midfield to provide fresh legs in the pressing traps. Guardiola watched the substitutions with narrowed eyes. He immediately recognized the danger. With City pushing high up the pitch to search for a second goal, Rashford's pace was lethal. Guardiola frantically signaled for Walker to drop 5 yards deeper to cover the runs. But Marcus had anticipated the City defense dropping deeper. With City's defensive line retreating to respect Rashford's speed, massive pockets of space suddenly opened up in the midfield. Donny van de Beek and Bruno Fernandes instantly exploited these gaps, dropping into the pockets to receive passes from Zakaria and McTominay. The momentum shifted. United were no longer just absorbing, they were punching back. In the 69th minute, the breakthrough arrived in devastating fashion. City attempted to build an attack down the left through Raheem Sterling. Scott McTominay stepped across with immense power, legally muscling the English winger off the ball. McTominay looked up and fizzed a firm, vertical pass into the feet of Van de Beek. The Dutchman, operating with elite spatial awareness, didn't even take a touch. He played a brilliant, first-time flick around the corner, perfectly into the path of Marcus Rashford, who was already accelerating down the left channel. Ruben Dias was forced to sprint across to cover. Rashford drove at the Portuguese defender, dropping his shoulder and darting toward the byline. In the center, Cristiano Ronaldo ignited. He made a hard run toward the near post, dragging Aymeric Laporte with him, before violently slamming on the brakes and peeling off toward the penalty spot. Rashford looked up and drilled a low, hard cut back across the wet grass. It bypassed Laporte completely. Ronaldo was waiting. The greatest goalscorer in Champions League history opened his hips and struck a ferocious, first-time shot that rocketed past Ederson into the roof of the net. Ronaldo. Drury's iconic roar tore through the commentary box. Inevitable. Inexorable. The Champions League's greatest marksman detonates the Stretford end. A breathtaking counterpunch from Marcus Vale's men. It is ruthlessly efficient, Beglin added, marveling at the replay. It's the pace of Rashford that panics Dias into leaving the center. But look at the movement from Ronaldo. He sells Laporte the near-post run, slams the brakes, finds the empty pocket, and the finish is merciless. Manchester United 1-1 Manchester City. Old Trafford exploded. The noise was deafening, a shockwave of pure, unadulterated passion. Ronaldo sprinted toward the corner flag, leaping into the air and executing his iconic celebration, completely engulfed by Rashford, Fernandes, and Van de Beek. Down on the touchline, Guardiola spun around and kicked a water bottle in frustration. He had adjusted for the pace, but the clinical execution of the transition had bypassed his entire defensive block. Marcus Vale simply clicked his magnet, offering a brief, lazy nod of approval. The final 20 minutes devolved into an elite, high-stakes tactical war, with both managers utilizing the remainder of their 5 substitutions to outmaneuver the other. In the 72nd minute, Pep Guardiola rolled the dice. He brought on Jack Grealish for Sterling to add control on the left wing, and Ilkay Gundogan replaced Bernardo Silva to inject fresh passing rhythm into the midfield. He wanted to win the game, trying to pin United back inside their own penalty area. Marcus countered immediately. He had no intention of allowing City to establish control. In the 76th minute, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, who had run himself into the ground neutralizing De Bruyne and defending the overloads, was replaced by Alex Telles. Simultaneously, Nemanja Matic replaced Bruno Fernandes. "Look at the shape now, Jim," Drury pointed out as the United players reorganized. Marcus Vale has shifted to a low block. It is a 5-3-2 out of possession. Telles and Trippier are operating as wing-backs. Matic, Zakaria and McTominay form an incredibly dense, physical midfield trio. He is essentially daring City to try and pass through a brick wall. Guardiola threw on Gabriel Jesus for Mahrez, desperately trying to add a second striker to break the five-man defensive line. But the United block was flawless. They moved horizontally as a single, connected unit. City are probing, knocking, demanding an opening, Drury commentated as the clock ticked past 80 minutes. But they are met by a red wall of defiance. Lindelof, Varane, Maguire, they are throwing themselves at everything, Beglin agreed. Vale's 5-3-2 is suffocating the centre. City are being forced to cross, and that is exactly what United want. 1. In the 85th minute, Marcus made his final substitution, replacing the exhausted McTominay with Victor Lindelof, fully committing to the defensive lockdown with three pure centre-backs. City held 72% possession in the final 10 minutes, but they did not register a single shot on target. The United lines were too tight, the distances too perfect, the discipline absolute. As the referee raised his whistle to his lips, Drury delivered the final call. And there is the final whistle. A stalemate in the rain. A 1-1 draw that leaves this Champions League quarter-final exquisitely poised. A fascinating tactical duel, Beglin summarized as the players collapsed onto the wet grass. Pep Guardiola will feel happier taking this away goal and this result back to the Etihad, but Marcus Vale has proven once again that his defensive shape cannot be easily broken. Full-time, Manchester United 1-1 Manchester City. The players were utterly exhausted from the physical and mental toll of the 90 minutes. They had given everything, fighting tooth and nail for a result against one of the most ruthless attacking teams in world football. Bruno Fernandes rested his hands on his knees, panting heavily, while Maguire pulled a drained Varane up from the turf. They had fought for the win, but they accepted the hard-earned draw. Pep Guardiola walked over to the United technical area. He looked relieved. A 1-1 draw at Old Trafford against an undefeated team was a highly respectable result. In Pep's mind, he had survived the away leg, scored a crucial goal, and now had the advantage of taking the tie back to the Etihad, where his team could dominate the pitch. Good game, Marcus, Guardiola said, shaking his hand firmly. We will finish this in Manchester. 4. It was a brilliant game, Pep, Marcus smiled lazily, returning the handshake. Safe travels back to the other side of town. We look forward to next week. As Guardiola walked down the tunnel, Marcus slipped his hands back into his coat pockets. His sleepy eyes scanned the pitch as his exhausted players applauded the Stretford end. To the media, to the fans, to the commentators, and to the players on both sides, this was a tense, natural draw that left the tie perfectly balanced. Two elite teams had collided, leaving everything on the pitch, and neither could find the definitive killing blow. But inside Marcus Vale's terrifying, multi-layered intellect, the trap had been perfectly set. He had never intended to chase a wild 3-0 victory tonight. If he had battered City at Old Trafford, Guardiola would have locked the Etihad down in the second leg, playing with paranoid, suffocating caution. By allowing the natural flow of the game to culminate in a gritty 1-1 draw, Marcus had given City the greatest tactical poison of all, the illusion of safety. City felt confident. They felt they had figured out the United puzzle. Next week, in front of their home fans, they would open up their lines. They would attack. They would try to dominate the game. 1. And the moment they opened up their shape, Marcus Vale was going to tear them to shreds. He pulled the red magnet from his pocket, flipped it over his knuckles with a final click, and walked down the tunnel. The first half of the war was over, and it had ended exactly as the supercomputer in his mind had predicted. At City_Chief, 1-1 at Old Trafford. I will take that. We survived the counter-attacks, controlled the midfield in the second half, and now we take them back to the Etihad. Advantage City. Large blue circle flexed biceps. At UTD District, full-time, 1-1. Gritty, hard-fought and incredibly disciplined. Ronaldo is inevitable in the Champions League. It all comes down to the Etihad next week. What a tie this is turning out to be. Large red circle at tactical_times, the substitution battle in the second half was elite. Guardiola used Bernardo to create the overload for the goal. Vale immediately countered with Rashford's pace, which forced City back and opened the space for the equaliser. Soccer ball. At Mark Holdbridge, brilliant result. People forget City are the champions of England. To go a goal down, not panic, and instantly equalise through Ronaldo shows the elite mentality Marcus Vale has built here. At Blue Moon Rising, De Bruyne finally got some space in the second half when Wan-Bissaka got tired, and boom, goal. Pep showed he can adapt to Vale's man marking. We will finish the job at home next week. At Stretford Pad, a 5-3-2 low block for the final 15 minutes was a masterstroke. Vale didn't let pride get in the way. He saw City bringing on Jesus and Grealish and just slammed the door shut to protect the draw. At Fabrizio Romano, Cristiano Ronaldo now has 10 Champions League goals this season. The link-up with Rashford for the equaliser was lightning fast. The second leg is going to be a movie. At CFC_fans, fair play to United, they actually know how to defend now. Varane and Maguire heading away every cross like their lives depended on it. Still think City edges it at the Etihad though. At UTD faithful, Donny van de Beek deserves his flowers. Comes off the bench, instant one-touch flick to release Rashford for the goal. Vale has completely revived his career. Tulub. At Statman Dave, Manchester United shifted formations 3 separate times tonight. Started with an asymmetrical 4-3-3, shifted to a 4-2-3-1 when Rashford came on, and finished with a 5-3-2 low block. The tactical flexibility is absurd. Chart with upward trend. At City's end 12, Grealish and Gundogan changed the game for us when they came on. We had them pinned back for the last 15 minutes. Once we get them on the big pitch at the Etihad, they won't be able to just park the bus. At the Man Utd way, we survived without Bruno Fernandes playing his best game, and with a heavily rotated shape. If we play the Diamond next week, City won't know what hit them. At Rio 35, proper Champions League knockout football. Neither team wanted to lose the tie in the first leg. Both defenses stood tall. 1-1 sets up a grandstand finish. Bring on the Etihad. Large red circle. At Espnfk, the handshake at the end said it all. Immense respect between Pep Guardiola and Marcus Vale. Nothing separates them after 90 minutes. Next week is for everything. At United Stand Mufk, I love how Marcus Vale didn't celebrate the equaliser. He just sat there. The man feels absolutely zero emotion. He's probably already planning the lineup for next Wednesday. 2. At Pep Tactics, City's goal was a piece of art. Mahrez pulling Wan-Bissaka wide, the blindside run from Bernardo. Beautiful positional play. The away draw is a fantastic platform for Pep to build on. At UTD Report, Scott McTominay won 8 out of his 10 ground duels tonight. He was a monster protecting that back line. Proving he can be a top-tier defensive midfielder under the right system. At _, it feels like a ceasefire rather than a full-time whistle. Both managers threw everything they had off the bench, and it ended in a stalemate. At UTD Trey, City fans celebrating a draw like they won the Champions League. They do realize we beat them 3-0 at their own stadium just a few weeks ago, right? Let them come at us next week. We are going to Paris. Loudly crying face large red circle. Chapter 55, Post-match press conference. Deep inside the concrete labyrinth of Old Trafford, the media auditorium was a hive of frantic energy. The air was thick with the rapid clacking of keyboards and the low murmur of journalists translating quotes into half a dozen languages. The 1-1 draw in the first leg of the Champions League quarter-final had delivered exactly the kind of high-stakes, breathless tension the world had anticipated. The UEFA media officer stepped to the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the manager of Manchester City, Pep Guardiola. Guardiola walked in, taking a quick sip from a water bottle before sitting down. He looked drained, yet there was a distinct, nervous energy vibrating through him. He rubbed his face, leaning into the microphone as the first hands shot up across the crowded room. Sam Lee, the athletic Pep, a 1-1 draw away at Old Trafford. How do you assess the result to take back to the Etihad? 1. Pep Guardiola, it is a good result. Very, very good. Old Trafford is one of the toughest stadiums in Europe, especially now. The team played with incredible personality. We controlled the ball, we created chances, and we did not panic when the atmosphere was difficult. I am incredibly proud of my players. Martin Blackburn, the Sun. You seemed very frustrated in the first half with Aaron Wan-Bissaka's man marking on Kevin De Bruyne. How difficult was that to solve? Pep Guardiola, yes. It was unexpected. Aaron is an incredible athlete, very physical. They sacrificed their left back to follow Kevin everywhere. But this is football. The opponent proposes a problem, and you have to find the solution. In the second half, Kevin dropped deeper, we used Bernardo higher up the pitch to exploit the space, and we found the goal. We adapted. 2. Jack Gohan, Daily Mail. Despite controlling the possession, you were caught on the counter for United's equalizer. Is that transition pace your biggest fear for the second leg? Pep Guardiola, fear? No. But it is a reality. When you have Rashford making the run and Cristiano inside the box, if you make one mistake in your counter-pressing, they punish you. They don't need 10 chances. They need 1. We must be perfect with the ball next week. Absolutely perfect. Simon Bajkowski, Manchester Evening News. How important was De Bruyne's goal for the psychology of the tie? Pep Guardiola, crucial. Kevin is Kevin. When the spaces are tight, when the opponent is defending with 10 players inside their own penalty area, you need special players to find the corner. He did exactly what the team needed. Rob Dawson, ESPN. Who has the advantage now? Are Manchester City favourites to advance? Pep Guardiola, in the Champions League, there are no favourites in the quarter-finals. It is 1-1. We have our fans next week. We will have our pitch. We will try to play our football. It will be another incredible fight. Guardiola nodded sharply, stood up, and exited the room to a smattering of applause from the travelling Manchester press. A few minutes later, the door opened again. Marcus Vale strolled into the auditorium. His heavy black coat was slightly unzipped, his posture adopting its signature, gravity-defying slouch. He didn't look like a man who had just managed a high-stakes European quarter-final. He looked like a university student who had been woken up from a nap in the library. He slumped into the chair, pulled his red magnet from his pocket, and began to roll it effortlessly over his knuckles. Click click click. The journalists, having just spoken to the hyper-intense Guardiola, leaned forward with anticipation. Samuel Luckhurst, Manchester Evening News. Marcus, a 1-1 draw. Are you satisfied with the performance and the result? Marcus blinked his sleepy eyes, looking at the reporter as if it was a trick question. Marcus Vale, yes. 1-1. It is a very nice number. Highly symmetrical. The players ran very hard, so they are happy. I am happy. The room chuckled. James Ducker, Telegraph. The decision to use Aaron Wan-Bissaka in a strict man-marking role on De Bruyne in the first half was a massive surprise. Where did that plan come from? Marcus stopped rolling the magnet for a second, scratching his jaw lazily. Marcus Vale, plan? Oh, Aaron just really likes Kevin De Bruyne. Big fan of his passing range. I think he just wanted to get a closer look at him for 45 minutes. They spent a lot of time together. It was very sweet. 1. Several journalists actually face-palmed. The tactical purists in the room stared at Marcus in bewilderment. He had just orchestrated one of the most brilliant defensive traps of the season, and he was describing it like a fan meet and greet. Laurie Whitwell, the athletic Cristiano Ronaldo scored the equalizer with an incredible first-time finish just minutes after City scored. How important is his experience in these massive knockout games? Marcus offered a small, lazy smile. Marcus Vale, well, he is Mr. Champions League for a reason. Plus, he gets very grumpy when we are losing. It ruins his entire mood for the week. He prefers scoring, so he scored. It keeps the dressing room much quieter. Henry Winter, Times. In the final 15 minutes, you withdrew your midfielders and shifted into a very deep 5-3-2 low block. Were you simply playing to survive the final stages? Marcus Vale, survive is a dramatic word. My players were just getting very tired of running horizontally. Standing in a straight line of 5 is much easier on the calves. You just head the ball away when it comes near you. Very relaxing. Charlotte Dunker, The Times. Ahead of the match, you mentioned the team is only operating at 40% of your tactical vision. After securing a hard-fought draw against City, do you feel you are closer to 41%? Marcus let out a soft, heavy sigh, shaking his head with genuine disappointment. Marcus Vale, no. 39%. Harry Maguire attempted a progressive, left-footed pass in the 81st minute when he shouldn't have. It was tragic. Set the whole project back a week. Melissa Reddy, Sky Sports. Pep Guardiola seemed very confident about taking this result back to the Etihad. Do you feel City have the advantage going into the second leg? Marcus tilted his head, returning to the rhythmic clicking of his magnet. Marcus Vale, maybe. They have a very nice stadium. The grass is very short there. The ball rolls very fast. I am sure it will be a lovely evening in East Manchester. We will just show up and see what happens. Before the journalists could fire off another round of questions, the auditorium door creaked open. Bruno Fernandes poked his head into the room, scanning the press corps before glaring directly at his manager. Bruno tapped his wrist sharply, pointing at an imaginary watch. "Boss," Bruno called out, his voice echoing over the microphone. "The bus is leaving. Stop trolling them, please. We want to go home." 2. Marcus offered a lazy, apologetic shrug to the media. "Ah, the babysitter is here. Duty calls." He stood up, tucked the magnet into his pocket, and slouched out of the room, leaving the press corps completely baffled by his eccentric riddles. Meanwhile, on national television, the BT Sport studio was broadcasting live to millions across the United Kingdom. Gary Lineker sat at the centre of the illuminated desk, flanked by Manchester United legend Rio Ferdinand, former Manchester City defender Joleon Lescott, and former United and City midfielder Owen Hargreaves. "Welcome back to the Champions League post-match coverage," Lineker announced, looking into the camera. "A breathless night of European football. Here in Manchester, it ends all square at Old Trafford, 1-1 between United and City. Rio, we'll start with you." Marcus Vale shifts into a 5-man defence for the final 15 minutes to shut up shop. Pragmatic genius or a dangerous gamble? "It's brilliant management, Gary," Ferdinand said, leaning forward enthusiastically. "Look, previous United managers would have panicked. They would have thrown on more attackers, left the midfield exposed, and City would have picked them off for a second goal. Marcus Vale doesn't care about the ego. He saw City bringing on Jesus and Grealish, and he just slammed the door shut. He says to his players, 'We have our goal, now we lock it down.' That's elite European mentality." Lescott shook his head slightly. "I agree the defence was solid, Rio, but City dominated the ball. Pep Guardiola will be the happier manager tonight. Getting an away draw at Old Trafford gives City a massive platform. On the wider pitch at the Etihad, City's wingers will find more space. United can't just park the bus for 90 minutes there." "They don't need to park the bus, Joleon," Owen Hargreaves interjected, leaning into the desk. "Did you see the counter-attack for Ronaldo's goal? It took them 6 seconds to go from Scott McTominay winning the tackle to the ball hitting the back of the net. Marcus Vale knows City will attack at the Etihad, and that plays right into United's hands. He has set up an asymmetrical block that is incredibly difficult to break through because AWB and Trippier are so dynamic. It is perfectly poised." Lineker nodded, steering the conversation. "It certainly is. But the Manchester derby wasn't the only heavyweight clash tonight. Let's head over to the Allianz Arena, where Bayern Munich hosted Liverpool. And Owen, what a game it was. 2-2 in Germany." The screens behind them flashed highlights of the thrilling encounter in Munich. "It was heavy metal football at its absolute finest," Hargreaves smiled. "Liverpool went to Munich and completely suffocated Bayern's midfield with their high press. Mo Salah getting the early goal, and then Sadio Mane equalising late in the second half. A 2-2 draw away against Bayern Munich is a phenomenal result for Jurgen Klopp. Bayern's transitions were terrifying, though," Ferdinand pointed out as the footage showed Leroy Sane sprinting down the wing. "They have that Bayern team moving the ball so fast on the break. Liverpool left a lot of space behind Trent Alexander-Arnold tonight. If they do that at Anfield next week, Bayern will punish them. That sets up an incredible Wednesday night next week," Lineker summarised. "Manchester City vs Manchester United at the Etihad. Liverpool vs Bayern Munich at Anfield. Two English giants looking to book their tickets to the semi-finals. We cannot wait." While the mainstream television studios bridged the broader narratives, the pulse of the Manchester United fanbase was beating furiously on YouTube. Inside the Stretford Paddock studio, Stephen Howson and Jay Motti were live, adrenaline still coursing through their post-match analysis. "Mate, I am absolutely drained," Howson exhaled, leaning back in his chair and rubbing his eyes. "That was one of the most intense tactical matches I have ever seen at Old Trafford. For 45 minutes, Pep Guardiola didn't have a clue what to do with Aaron Wan-Bissaka. It was an absolute shift, Steve," Motti agreed, reading through the live chat. "Wan-Bissaka basically put De Bruyne in his pocket and locked the zip. It was dirty, gritty, beautiful football. But when City scored, I thought, here we go, heads are going to drop. Under previous regimes, we fold there. We concede a second. But not under Marcus Vale. Howson grew incredibly animated, grabbing a dry erase marker and leaping out of his chair toward the tactical whiteboard behind him. Look at what Dybala was doing in the first half. He operates right here, dropping deep into the half space to completely dragging Ruben Dias out of position. Howson slammed the marker onto the board with such aggressive excitement that the entire whiteboard frame wobbled violently, sheared off its plastic hinges, and crashed directly onto the studio floor with a thunderous clatter. The live chat erupted into a frenzy of laughing emojis. Jay Motti burst into hysterical laughter, covering his face. Howson stood frozen, holding the marker, looking down at the wreckage. Right, well, tactical breakdown over. The point is, the transition pace changes instantly when Rashford comes on. And that flick from Donny? Pure filth. We are lethal now. A few miles away, another massive corner of the internet was tuning in. Mark Goldbridge sat in his illuminated United Stand studio, wearing his classic retro United kit. The viewer count on the YouTube livestream was ticking past 80,000 concurrent watchers. Goldbridge was buzzing, his hands moving rapidly as he addressed the camera. Fair play. Absolute fair play to Marcus Vale, Goldbridge stated, nodding emphatically. We did not fold. We did not crumble. We went toe-to-toe with City in a Champions League quarter-final, and we gave them hell. The tactical setup in the first half was a masterclass. A colorful animation flashed across the screen, signaling a super chat donation. Goldbridge leaned forward, squinting slightly to read the screen. Super chat from James. Mark, did Vale get it wrong starting AWB at left back instead of Tells? No, James, absolutely not, Goldbridge replied instantly. He didn't play a traditional left back role, mate. That's the genius of it. If Tells starts, Mahrez cooks him for pace on the overlap. Vale put Wan-Bissaka there purely to do a demolition job on Kevin De Bruyne, and it worked for an hour. He basically told AWB to be a shadow. It was a sacrifice, and it kept us in the tie. Another super chat appeared on the dashboard. Super chat from Red Evil 99, are we too reliant on Ronaldo in the Champions League? Needs more from the wingers. Look, get in the bin with that narrative, Goldbridge sighed, waving his hand dismissively. Are we too reliant on the greatest goalscorer in the history of the competition? Yes. And so was Real Madrid. When you have a weapon like Cristiano Ronaldo, you use him. Sancho and Rashford did the dirty work today. They dragged the defenders away so Ronaldo could find the space. He's Mr. Champions League. Marcus Vale literally just said it in the press conference. Another donation popped up, sending Goldbridge into an immediate rant. Super chat from City Blue, we battered you in the second half. On a bigger pitch at the Etihad, we will destroy you. Goldbridge laughed, a dry, sarcastic chuckle. Bloody hell, the pitch size myth again. You City fans love this one. Oh, the Etihad is bigger. Mate, the pitches are regulated by UEFA. It's the same dimensions. You didn't batter us, we let you have the ball outside the box because we shifted to a back five. Trying to pass through that five-man defense in the last 15 minutes was like trying to get a cash refund from Ryanair. It's not happening, mate. You can click the button all day, but nobody's answering the chat. Keep that same energy for next week when Rashford has 50 yards of green grass to run into behind Kyle Walker. The screen flashed again. Super chat from Unite Irish, McTominay was immense today. He and Zakaria look like a proper wall. Spot on, Goldbridge pointed at the screen. Spot on. I've been critical of Scott McTominay in the past, but under Marcus Vale, he looks like a different player. Because he's actually being coached. Vale doesn't ask Scott to be Andrea Pirlo. He asks him to be a physical destroyer next to Zakaria. Bernardo Silva bounced off him today like he hit a brick wall. That double pivot was crucial tonight. The final super chat of the segment flashed on the screen. Super chat from Pete, do we go for the win next week, or does Vale play for penalties? Goldbridge leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath. Pete? Marcus Vale does not play for penalties, Goldbridge said slowly, a serious smile creeping onto his face. Have you watched this man over the last few months? He is a cold, calculating killer. He wanted 1-1 tonight. He wanted City to feel like they survived. Because next week, Pep is going to tell his players to attack. City will push up. And the second they do, Vale is going to unleash Rashford, Ronaldo and Bruno into the space. He's not going there to park the bus for penalties, mate. He's going there to end their European season. Goldbridge hit the soundboard, triggering a loud, dramatic air horn noise. We are well and truly alive in this tie. Bring on the second leg. Up the Reds. Dash. At City_Chief, United fans acting like they won the game because they defended for 20 minutes. It's 1-1. We have the best home record in Europe. De Bruyne found the gap once, he'll find it again at the Etihad. See you next Wednesday. Large blue circle. At UTD District, Mark Goldbridge is completely right. Pep thinks he escaped Old Trafford with a good result, but Vale is just setting the trap for the second leg. We want them to attack us. Large red circle. At Troll Football, Kevin De Bruyne trying to enjoy a quiet anniversary dinner with his wife tonight while Aaron Wan-Bissaka sits at the next table staring at him in a full United kit. Image attached 1. At Tactical_Times, Marcus Vale's press conferences are a psychological study. The media asks him complex tactical questions about his 5-3-2 low block, and he tells them standing in a line is easier on the calves. He gives his opponents zero analytical material to work with. At LFC_family, brilliant result for us in Munich. 2-2 away from home. Maine and Salah were lethal. Anfield will be rocking next week. Let United and City kick lumps out of each other, we are going to the semis. Large red circle. At Blue Moon Rising, can someone explain how McTominay didn't get booked? He literally threw Raheem Sterling into the advertising boards. United get away with murder at Old Trafford. At Stretford Paddock, the sheer arrogance of City fans complaining about physical tackles. This is the Champions League. You don't get a free pass just because you can complete 50 passes in your own half. Zakaria and McTominay bullied them. At Fabrizio Romano, Jurgen Klopp post-match, Bayern are an incredible machine, but my boys fought like lions today. An amazing night of Champions League football. Manchester and Munich delivering absolute classics. Soccer ball. At AFC Gunner, Vale saying Wan-Bissaka man marked De Bruyne just because he wanted a closer look at him is the funniest quote of the season. He is openly trolling Pep Guardiola on live television. Face with tears of joy. At UTD Faithful, Bruno Fernandes literally pulling Marcus Vale out of the press room because the team bus was leaving is pure peak United chemistry. Bruno has to manage the manager. Loudly crying face. At Statman Dave, Cristiano Ronaldo has now scored 24 goals in Champions League quarter-finals in his career. The man is an anomaly. When the knockout stages begin, he becomes a different entity. At the Man UTD way, Marcus dropping the team's tactical development from 40% down to 39% because of Harry Maguire's left-footed pass in the 81st minute has me crying. Maguire catches strays even when we draw. Skull. At Rio 35, heavy metal in Munich, tactical warfare in Manchester. The Champions League never disappoints. Cannot wait for the second legs. Housen knocking his own whiteboard over on stream sums up the nerves. Fire. At United Stand Mufk, 80,000 in the live stream tonight. The fanbase is completely united right now. Marcus Vale has us believing in miracles again. Next week we conquer the Etihad. Large red circle.
Additionally, if you would like to request novels and access my Google Drive where I have 200+ audiobooks, then you can join my Patreon. Link is also provided in the description.